Our book today is From Slave Ship to Supermax, Mass Incarceration, Prisoner Abuse, and the New Neo-Slave Model by Patrick Elliott Alexander. This is Chapter 1. Talking in George Jackson's Shadow is the title, If Beale Street Could Talk. Prison preoccupied the literary imagination of James Baldwin. Yet his biographer David Leeming is one of the few to notice that prisons and prisoners were a significant part of Baldwin's own personal experience. Even the most cursory glance at Baldwin's published works and interviews bear out Leeming's important observation. In his essay Equal in Paris, 1955, Baldwin reveals that during his time in France, he was, quote, arrested as a receiver of stolen goods and spent 8 days in prison. While confined, Baldwin witnessed with great shock another incarcerated man's bleeding and wounding go unattended intentionally by prison staff. In his longer essay, No Name on the Street, 1972, Baldwin reflects on frequent prison visits that he made to his friend Tony Maynard, a black man who suffered violent treatment from guards after he was falsely accused with the murder of a white U.S. Marine. Baldwin's advocacy for black political prisoners in particular deeply informed his writings and public addresses throughout the 1970s and included actions such as aiding in the release of imprisoned Black Panther Party co-founders Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. In 1970, Baldwin was so outraged by the appearance of Angela Davis, the black revolutionary and advocate for political prisoners in handcuffs and mock mugshot posture on the cover of Newsweek magazine, that he published an open letter to the New York Review of Books in which he deemed her jailing a continuation of slavery and a foreshadowing of a radicalized epidemic of mass incarceration at one and at the same time. Quote, only a handful of the millions of people in this vast place are unaware that the fate intended for you, Sister Angela, and for the numberless prisoners in our concentration camps, for that is what they are, is a fate which is about to engulf them too, end quote. When Baldwin spoke out about racism in the criminal justice system in the Dick Cavett Show in 1973, he won widespread admiration among imprisoned black communities, receiving, quote, so many letters from them that he determined to arrange a Christmas version of his musical drama, The Hallelujah Chorus, that would tour American prisons. Finally, in 1982, Baldwin published a letter in which he insisted that artists and prisoners have more in common with one another than have servants of the state. Baldwin was a stranger neither to witnessing nor to writing about prisons and prisoner abuse. Yet Baldwin's oeuvre had not been examined extensively in the context of his engagements with the literature and life experiences of imprisoned men and women. This chapter focuses on Baldwin's understanding of prisoner abuse and police intimidation as interrelated, radicalized social control functions of the contemporary U.S. carceral state, and pays careful attention to how his historicizing of radicalized state violence in fiction is shaped by his admiring engagement with the writings of imprisoned intellectuals. Baldwin, I contend, alludes to the human chattel conditioning disciplinary violence, and economic exploitation that typified the institution of slavery in his Black liberation movement era short stories and novels to situate his Black working class characters' subjection to racial profiling, police brutality, wrongful incarceration, indefinite solitary confinement, prisoner abuse, and premature death in racialized historical context. Focusing mostly on Baldwin's novel If Beale Street Could Talk, 1974, this chapter explores how Baldwin, inspired by the narrative techniques of the imprisoned intellectual George Jackson, links a repressive logic of racial terror from the era of antebellum slavery with the state's practice of white supremacist social control into the contemporary criminal justice system. I argue that by incorporating Baldwin's conception of neo-slavery into the elusive framework for Beale Street, Baldwin elucidates the predictability, rather than the aberrant nature, of Black men's hypercriminalization, incarceration, and brutalization by the state. Beale Street thus exemplifies well what I theorized in the introduction as a neo-abolitionist novel. With this work, Baldwin becomes the first canonical African-American writer to construct a conceptual model of the prison-industrial complex in fiction that privileges the narrative viewpoint of its captives while also making apparent slavery's vestiges in the contemporary U.S. criminal justice system. My point of departure for this chapter is Baldwin's career-length consideration of racial terror as a state-sanctioned social control function of both pre- and post-slavery American life, and the relationship of this instrumentalist terror to Blacks' recurring encounters with state violence in the late 20th and 21st centuries. This contextualization establishes a broader framework within which my reading of criminalization and punishment in Beale Street might be understood. Baldwin's witnessing of the physical, psychological, and spiritual harm that the criminalized Black body endures at the hands of the state shows up prominently in his nonfiction works as well. In his book-length essay, No Name in the Street, for instance, Baldwin's assessment of wounds that prison guards inflict on his former driver and bodyguard, Tony Maynard, a wrongfully incarcerated Black man, is characteristically disturbing and damning. The book, From Slave Ship to Supermax. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to Patreon.
The Thom Hartmann Program.
Greetings, my friends, patriots, lovers of democracy, truth, and justice, believers in peace, freedom, and the American way. Thom Hartmann here with you. Welcome to our program. In the second hour of our show, Congressman Mark Pocan today, our program today, Congressman Mark Pocan will be taking your calls for the hour. It'll be midday with Mark. And in our third hour, Victoria Jones is going to drop by. The Me Too movement is being stopped in its tracks in the United Kingdom by some very, very wealthy men. And it's fascinating. You're going to want to know about that. But I wanted to start with what Hans Nichols has come right out and said. And that is that what we are looking at here is, well, he didn't use this phrase. You know, I would say it's stochastic terrorism. What we're looking at, there's a type of terrorism. It's called stochastic, S-T-O-C-H-A-S-T-I-C, stochastic. And what it means is, well, actually, there's a definition of this. What Hans Nichols said. Here's what he said. He said, you have conservative lawmakers. See, we have now bombs at Hillary Clinton's house, bombs at Barack Obama's house, and bombs at CNN, right? Or things that look like bombs. He said, quote, you have conservative law, and a bomb at George Soros's house. He said, you have had conservative lawmakers push some conspiracy theories that say George Soros is funding that caravan. You have seen some things that have been clearly debunked, issues that are not actually factual. Republican congressman, namely Matt Gaetz down there in Florida, talk about how George Soros is funding that caravan. So he's talking about that in that context. The last time we had a meaningful conversation about this on this program was back in 2011. After Gabby Giffords was shot. In 2016, Rolling Stone, David Cohen did a piece in Rolling Stone about stochastic terrorism. And in fact, interestingly, Merriam-Webster, the dictionary site, I mean, if you look up what is stochastic terrorism, what is it? The headline is, were Trump's comments stochastic terrorism? This is from August 10th, 2016. This is on Merriam-Webster's website in their News Trend Watch section. They say lookups for stochastic spiked after an article in Rolling Stone used the word to describe Trump's suggestion that Second Amendment people could do something about Hillary Clinton. What it means is, and this is, from Merriam-Webster, stochastic terrorism means using language and other forms of mass communication. So this is in the people who have access to the media to incite random actors to carry out violent or terrorist acts that are statistically predictable, but individually unpredictable. Now, the benefit of this, the reason why basically every nationalist authoritarian movement that has used stochastic terrorism over the years has risen to power in the wake of chaos is because they could plausibly deny they had anything to do with it. You know, Trump comes out and says, quote, Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. And by the way, if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is something you can do. I don't know. But I'll tell you, it'll be a horrible day if Hillary gets her judges in. Right now, we're tied. That's what Trump said back in 2016. This was during the primary. But I think that the point here, let's just combine both of these concepts and then, fully understand what happened in Mussolini's Italy. What happened in Pinochet's Chile, what happened in Franco's Spain. Well, what happened around the world? I mean, there's a website called stochasticterrorism.blogspot.com that has a detailed explanation of this. And like I said, we talked about this on this program back in 2011 at some length. And in fact, you can find the threads are still over on our website. In fact, January 13th, the headline, are Sarah Palin, Glenn Beck, Michael Savage, and the rest of the gang guilty of stochastic terrorism? ? I'm asking that question today about Trump and Bannon and Miller and the other guys, now that we know that Bannon and Miller are the ones behind the racist immigration question on the census and other things. See, go back to bin Laden. Bin Laden would release a video saying, oh, look at these horrible things that the West is doing. They hate Islam. They're going to kill us all. They're trying to destroy us. And boom, somebody would go blow themselves up. The stochastic terrorist in that case was bin Laden, but you couldn't prove an association between him and the person who blew themselves up half a world away. And that's what happens. And that's how it works. The person who actually plants the bomb or assassinates the public official, they're not the stochastic terrorist. They are the missile that was put into motion by the stochastic terrorist. And the person, the terrorist, is the person who uses the mass media as their weapon, as their tool, as the means to set those missiles in motion. And yeah, you could say, oh, it's a lone nut or it's a crazy person. Well, there's enough of them out there that if you want to be a stochastic terrorist and you are on a major television network, or you are on a radio program, or you are on a major radio network, or you're on hundreds of radio stations around the country, or you simply have access to the media, you're a member of Congress or something like that, you can hold a press conference and get your message, you too can be a stochastic terrorist. There's nothing mysterious about this. All it takes is just the right push, right? The right few words. Back on 27 July 2008, this is from that website, stochasticterrorism.blogspot.com. On July 27, 2008, lone wolf shooter Jim David Atkinson walked into the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church and shot 9 people, killing 2 and wounding 7. He said he was motivated by his hatred of, and I quote, Democrats, liberals, the N-word, and the F-word for gay people. Only he used the words, obviously. When the police searched his home, they found books by Michael Savage, Sean Hannity, and Bill O'Reilly. On April 4th, 2009, Richard Poplowski shot 5 Pittsburgh police officers, leaving 3 dead and 2 seriously wounded. Police searched his computer and found links to various groups into a YouTube video of Glenn Beck talking about FEMA concentration camps coming. On May 31st, 2009, lone wolf Scott Roeder shot and killed gynecologist Dr. George Tiller while Tiller was attending church services. This is one of the clearest examples. Bill O'Reilly had over 20 times used the phrase Tiller the baby killer, this relentless campaign against George Tiller on his nationally syndicated Fox television program. In this case, Bill O'Reilly was the stochastic terrorist, and Scott Roeder was the missile who got activated. No relationship between the two. See, you can't hold Bill O'Reilly to account for this, other than morally. The Tides Foundation. There was this guy, a convicted felon. His name was Byron Williams. Set out from his mother's home, and so many of these lone wolves are setting out from their parents' basements, heading for San Francisco. He was stopped by the California Highway Patrol for weaving in and out of traffic at high speed. When stopped, he immediately opened fire on the police. He wounded 2 of the California Highway Patrol officers. They returned fire. They shot him in the leg and then took him into custody. And at first they thought they were looking at a garden variety cop shooter, but no, he said Glenn Beck was his primary motivation. According to Williams, quote, Glenn Beck is like a school teacher on TV. He's been breaking open some of the most hideous corruption. Beck would never say anything about a conspiracy, but he would never advocate violence. He'll never do anything of this nature, but he'll give me every ounce of evidence that you could possibly need, end of quote. Prior to Williams' planned attack, Beck had mentioned the obscure Tides Foundation 29 times on his program. This is stochastic terrorism. You heat the waters, you stir up the pot, knowing full well that sooner or later a lone wolf is going to pop up. Trump has been promoting this. It's been around on the right for a long, long time. As I'm pointing out to you, these go back to 2007, 2000, just calling it out. This has been going on for a long time. But it has become one of the principal methods now of scaring the hell out of the Republican Party, scaring the hell out of the Republican voters. In fact, when we come back from this break, I'm going to play an ad that right now the Republican Party is playing. I saw it last night on my TV here in Portland, Oregon, that, in my opinion, is stochastic terrorism. It's an incitement to violence by, quote, lone wolves or lone nuts, by unstable individuals. There's a reason why we haven't done this in America for a long, long time.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Outside, of course, of the constant stochastic terrorism of organizations like the Klan over the last couple hundred years. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program. On YouTube. What's up?
Hey, hi, Tom. You already set up the show so eloquently. I can't really top it. I can only add things like, you don't see, they can no longer, talk about the violence on the left anymore. Boo-hoo about Mitch McConnell getting, cursed out of a restaurant, and, this stuff about the mobs, and, it just doesn't even hold water anymore. Like, you don't see Mitch McConnell being sent bombs. You don't see, anybody, right-leaning Supreme Court justice being sent bombs. Like, this is unreal now. I mean, I want to see Democrats screaming about this. Like, I want them to, every time the right says anything about, leftist violence, they need to be shoving this in their face every single time. I mean, this is the same stuff the NRA does, with their messages that are basically veiled threats. It's just getting out of control, Tom. And I don't even know. I don't even have much more to say other than that. I'm just so flabbergasted.
Yeah.
I'll let you go.
That's okay, Tripper. I think you said it very well, and I share your frustration. And other than pointing it out and encouraging the Democrats to really go after this, and I'll mention this to Mark Pocan when he comes on in the next hour. I think that this is a big deal, and the Republicans are doing this right in front of us. Tripper, thank you for the call. Bill, watching us on Free Speech TV in Linwood, Washington. Hey, Bill, what's up?
Hi, Mr. Hartman. Good to talk with you again.
Thank you.
I think President Donald J. Trump needs to immediately impose a ban on the travel of all Christians into the United States, until we can figure out what the hell is going on. He needs to place marshals in the Christian churches so we can, and if Christians see anything, they need to say something.
Yeah. Okay, I don't get this. Are you suggesting that Christian churches represent a threat or represent a target?
I'm making an assumption, and by the transitive logic of his Muslim ban, I'm just making the assumption that the person mailing these bombs is a right-wing fundamentalist, and until we get an idea of what's going on here, all Christians should be banned from coming into the country.
Bill, I'm assuming this is tongue-in-cheek, that you're making fun of Trump's Muslim ban.
It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. I mean, it's the exact same thing as his Muslim ban.
Yeah.
It's the exact same thing.
If you were to define right-wingism as a religion, or Fox Newsism as a cult, then maybe we could figure out a way to say people who are large consumers of media that Rupert Murdoch owns are cult members and therefore should be denied travel visas. But
thank you for refining it. I mean, I'm just saying, if you're just going to group a whole religion together, let's just group them all together.
Yeah.
And I was raised Christian, so look at me too.
Yeah, same here. And I still call myself a Christian.
I don't, but
yeah, but here
Christian, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
For real.
I consider myself a follower of Christ and his teachings, but we'll leave it at that. Anyhow, that's a whole nother conversation. But Bill, we have a serious terrorism problem here in the United States right now, and it's being ginned up by these stochastic terrorists on the right. Bill, thanks for the call. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann, people who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Welcome back. Okay, if we define in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster even talking about this, excuse me, back in 2016 when Donald Trump said that maybe some Second Amendment people would take care of Hillary Clinton, that was by their definition, by the definition of their dictionary, stochastic terrorism. It's a word we all need to pronounce like 10 times to get it. We probably need a new version of this, right? Inciters of violence, really, is what we have always called them. But see, that posits a direct correlation between the inciter and the violence. And in this case, somebody standing in front of a crowd saying, yes, pick up your rocks and throw them at those windows. Well, this isn't that. This is somebody on television or radio or in the political world saying, gee, look at this. I mean, those other people out there, they're a threat to us. They're a danger to us. They're coming after us. They're going to hurt us. And you don't have to say the other half. You don't have to say, and so we should pick up our rocks, so we should build our bombs, so we should take, you don't have to say that. And this has been the Republican message since Trump was elected. I mean, it's been arguably the Republican message for long before that, but this is the ad. Here is the ad that the Republicans are running right now, presumably nationwide. I'm seeing it here in Portland, Oregon. I'm wondering if you're seeing this ad too, and how people that are responding to it. Here it is.
The screaming, the violence, the smears, and death threats. The far left moving to socialism, undefended open borders, immediate tax increases, 100% government-run health care. The booming economy stopped. Nancy Pelosi back in power. Gridlock. And then impeachment. Is that really what you want? Voting for any Democrat gets you all of that. The screaming, the violence.
This is obscene. All right, and if you were watching that, those of you who watch us on Free Speech TV or on YouTube or Facebook, you could see. I mean, the imagery is shocking. It's frightening. And I mean, this is a major political party and its billionaire donors, basically accusing American citizens and politicians of being, this is just beyond the pale. I don't know how to say it beyond that. The other thing yesterday, and this is the last thing on this note that I want to bring in, and then I'll pick up your calls after the break at the bottom of the hour. The headline this morning in one of the papers was, Trump injects nationalism straight into the veins of his followers. And yesterday I said, well, I think with nationalism, he just means, I love my country. I spent a little time last night researching nationalism, the history of nationalism. What does the word mean? And nationalism has really never, outside of the America First movement, which was don't challenge Hitler in World War II, the anti-World War II movement. Outside of that, the only nationalism that we've ever practiced in this country has been essentially white nationalism. Because nationalism, unlike patriotism means I love my country. Nationalism is typically associated with a country that has a singular genetic base. Right? Norwegians have been living in Norway. Their family's been living in Norway for 10,000 years, and that's why they're Norwegians. Swedes, the same thing. Greeks, the same thing. French, the same thing. There is a racial, essentially, identity or a genetic identity. Germans, the whole basis of Hitler's argument was, blood and soil. And so there is this racial identity that is necessary for nationalism. We don't describe America using nationalist terms because we are not a racialized people. This is the first country that was based on a concept, right, out of the Enlightenment, the concept of democracy in a republic. And therefore, we use the word patriotism in the United States. When you use the word nationalism, you're talking about a country whose principal identity is defined by race.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And so, gee, surprise, when Donald Trump talks about nationalism, David Duke tweets out, "Thank you, Donald Trump, for finally speaking the truth." Today we're reading The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence by Michael D'Antonio. This is from the first chapter. For decades, Pence had presented himself as a humble servant who could be entrusted with power because he was at heart a mild-mannered Midwesterner. Friends and foes alike said his major character trait was extreme niceness. When given the opportunity, Pence described himself as a true Hoosier, son of Indiana, who was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. This is how he had introduced himself to the country at the Republican National Convention 6 months earlier. The list contrasted with the usual pledge politicians make to put country first. This is what President Obama did after the 2016 election when he said, "We are not Democrats first, we are not Republicans first, we are Americans first." The vice president's self-declared identity revealed both his priorities and the source of his power. For 30 years, he had helped lead the Republican Party into a closer alliance with preachers who were turning evangelical Christianity from a religion into a political crusade that engaged in a culture war with non-believers. The aim of many was to destroy abortion rights, roll back the equality gained by gay citizens, and prepare the nation for the second coming of Christ. Pence and others used martial metaphors and considered themselves warriors of the Christian right, both besieged and called upon to fight. Quote, "Those who would have us ignore the battle being fought over life, marriage, and religious liberty have forgotten the lessons of history," said Pence in 2010. "America's darkest moments have come when economic arguments trumped moral principles." Pence's allies in his war included hugely wealthy donors who, despite their vast wealth accumulated at a time of historic inequality, also posed as victims. As libertarians in the mold of Ayn Rand's cardboard characters, they felt inhibited in the pursuit of even greater riches by a government that imposed foolish regulations and would redistribute their wealth to the supposedly indolent poor. Starting with this perspective, they denied the science behind environmental protection, demanded tax cuts for themselves, and insisted on massive reductions in programs serving anyone who wasn't rich. The victimhood claimed by both the libertarians and the Christian right permitted the construction of an alternative reality that denied their own power and masked their ambition to make politics and culture conform to an ideology that included white Christian supremacy and predatory capitalism. It also denied the progress they had made in their construction of their own political might. With his oath of office, Vice President Pence became both the free marketer's hero and the most successful Christian supremacist in American history. Most of Pence's life had been preparation for this moment, and possibly one more. His lifelong goal, set when he was a boy, was the Oval Office itself. Remarkably, he had reached this point by tying his fate to Donald J. Trump, a man whose immorality in the form of lying, cheating, and deceiving in every aspect of his life, from his marriage to his businesses, had made him a living exemplar of everything that Christianity and conservatism abhorred. However, this record also suggested that Pence was more likely to assume the highest office in the land than most vice presidents who had come before. To put it bluntly, Trump was vulnerable to impeachment. If this occurred, Pence would see the hand of God at work in his elevation to the presidency. In the meantime, he would wait and watch. On Inauguration Day, with Pence looking on, a slightly stooped Donald Trump stepped forward when it was his turn to face the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts. Beside Trump stood his wife, Melania, the former fashion model, who held two Bibles, Lincoln's and Trump's own. At the stroke of noon, the president-elect raised his right hand and placed his left on the Bibles. As he did this, Trump's family members and hundreds of political and government figures strained to see the moment. Trump and Pence were a study in contrast. At age 58, Pence appeared trim, perhaps even athletic, and could have passed for a man 10 years younger. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hands were clasped at his waist, and his smooth face was set in a half smile. Mere feet away, in sum, he resembled a small-town pastor, or maybe even a funeral director. Mere feet away, a stern-faced 70-year-old Trump stood with his coat hanging open like a caftan to reveal a long red necktie. Despite much cosmetic intervention, he looked old and tired. At the conclusion of the presidential oath, which had been voiced by 44 presidents before him, Trump said the words, "So help me God," and accepted the congratulations of those closest to him with a thin-lipped, toothless grin. He then delivered a 15-minute speech replete with distortions and falsehoods that were his trademark. He declared that America was awash with crime and despair and under constant attack. "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now," said Trump. It was the most remembered phrase of the address. That was some weird S-word, former President George W. Bush was heard to remark as he left the inaugural stand. Weird was the mildest word that one could attach to the 45th President of the United States as he launched an administration that would be stained by scandal and corruption so broad it defied a citizen's ability to grasp. Cronyism, secrecy, and nepotism would flourish. Presidential lies, daily cataloged by the Washington Post and others, would come at the rate of more than 150 per month. From the moment of his oath, Mike Pence, the vice president, faced the historic, some would say daunting, challenge of dealing with an erratic and undisciplined commander-in-chief. The book, The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, let's pick up your phone calls here. Nancy in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Hey, Nancy, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Love you. Love your show. God bless you.
Thank you.
Stochastic terrorism. Remember when Sarah Palin put the crosshairs over Gabby Giffords?
Yeah, that was the last time I talked about it on this
district?
program.
Well, I never thought that she got the blame that she should have gotten for that because it was so obvious
Yeah.
why she got shot. And you were talking about this briefly the other day about Second Amendment remedies.
Right.
That was Sharon Angle that had brought it up.
Right. She used
before.
that phrase, that Second Amendment remedies specifically.
Yeah.
And she was using it in
Right.
reference to Harry Reid, wasn't she? Wasn't that when she was running against Harry Reid?
Well,
Actually, I don't
I'm not
remember.
sure,
I'm not. Neither of us are
was-
sure. But yeah, it was
It
Sharon
was
Angle
during
who
the
said it.
Obama election, and
Yeah.
there were so many bad things being thrown around. And
Yeah.
also one other thing, Tom, if I could very quickly, it was cadet bone spurs, not corporal bone spurs.
You're right. Thank you for the reminder,
Yes.
Nancy. That yes, cadet bone spurs. You're absolutely right. Nancy, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. That's a good one. T in Lithonia, Georgia. Hey, T, what's up?
Hey, how you doing, Tom? I'm a 3-year listener, first-time caller.
Well, thank you,
And
T.
I was just calling about the, whole suspicious package bomb situation going on right now. And I kind of wrote about this a few months ago. Like, it's only a coincidence that it happens the day after he claims himself a nationalist,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Pretty much he just gave the green light to all these fringe groups and, these militia groups and white nationalists that was, sitting there waiting for that time to strike or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I'm kind of thinking that if you look down the line, November's right around the corner, right? That it's a right for one of those constitutional crises where, he can always stop an election if he deems the vote to be dangerous. Like, if it's too dangerous to go vote. Say if somebody goes and shoots up a Beto O'Rourke rally or something like that, days
God
before
forbid.
the election, or some bomb goes off some other state, they can always say, oh, well, it's not safe to vote. Let's delay it for now until we can find these, transgressors. And
Well, Trump already said that essentially in the tweet that he sent out day before yesterday. I mean, this was naked voter suppression, where he said, our police agencies will be at the polls making sure, I'm paraphrasing here, making sure, it's a felony to vote illegally, and we're going to, and I mean, there used to be those, in the 2016 election, or maybe it was the 2012 election, there were those giant billboards in black communities in Georgia and in Wisconsin, as I recall, maybe Minnesota, that said, illegal voting is a felony, 5 years in prison, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So I'm with you, T.
Yeah, I'm just saying that everybody should get ready for that possibility that that constitutional crisis that Hillary kind of warned us about could possibly happen.
I think you're right.
The blue wave happens, right?
I think you're right. And the important thing to note is that, I mean, Mussolini started calling himself a fascist right away. There was a certain period of time with Adolf Hitler before he started calling himself a fascist. I don't know how long that was. It's been 30 years since I read Shearer's book. But Donald Trump has now embraced the white nationalist phrase, the we are a nation defined by our genetics. And that's a major turning point, in my opinion. And the reason why that concerns me so much is that if the Republicans hold the House of Representatives, and $300 million from the Koch brothers now going into these ads that we're seeing all over the country, scaring the bejesus out of people about Democrats, and then Republicans coming right out in line, oh yeah, I love pre-existing conditions, I'm all in favor of blocking insurance companies from not paying them, when they're in the middle of a lawsuit right now to take down the blocking, to make it possible for health insurance companies to once again refuse to pay for pre-existing conditions. Between the lies and the scares, if they hold the House and Trump continues with this nationalist rhetoric, and you look at who he likes to hang out with, he likes to hang out with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, a thug, an autocrat. These right-wing governments all around the world, Duterte in the Philippines, Netanyahu in Israel, Putin in Russia. He met briefly with Viktor Orban from Hungary at one of the G whatever it was meetings. He's not embracing small d Democrats. He's having open disagreements with Theresa May and Angela Merkel, and it could be just because they're women, but he's also having open disagreements with Macron in France. So it's like he's not. Hitler and Mussolini got in tight really early, and then they brought in Franco, and then they brought in Tojo, and pretty soon you had this axis of these hard right powers. And it's starting to look to me like Trump is recreating that with the United States getting into bed with all these autocratic authoritarian regimes and rejecting the norms of democracy. And step one is to prepare the people. It's to cause the people to think, oh, there's an external enemy out there. They're coming to get us. They're terrible. Oh, geez, they're among us. We have to purge ourselves of these people. This is an old song. T, I gotta move along, but thank you for the call. Kenyatta in Redlands. Hey, Kenyatta, what's up?
I just wanted to let you know that in the last 2 years, Tom, I have been called the N-word, as polite speak would warrant, 4 times in the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, I had not been called that word directly for many, many years. And in 2 of those situations, it actually got to the point where there was some touching. And I think that you have a president who has pardoned people like Joseph Arpaio. He's given all kinds of pardons. He said that I'll pay your legal fees at his rallies if you beat up somebody, that black guy over there, whatever it is, the troublemaker. Yep. I'll pay your legal fees. You're talking about stochastic terrorism, the reversion and civil rights acts laws, affirmative action laws, all of that stuff's going on right now with Jeff Sessions. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And let me tell you something, this isn't a dog whistle anymore. It's not just those missiles you talked about. There are lots of little hand grenades. Yeah. And people are being emboldened by this guy's rhetoric. And it's happening at the street level. Yep.
I retweeted yesterday a 1938 American documentary on Germany. And it's about a 15-minute long clip, and it's shocking. And but the main point of it was that the German people were experiencing in 1938. Now, this was before the invasion of Poland, right? There were already work camps set up around Germany that Jews and communists and trade unionists and whatnot had been sent to work. But they went to Berlin and they walked all over the city. And here's all these prosperous white Christians, this prosperous city, people having nice meals together. The media has been shut down. The public dissent has been shut down. There are no dissenting voices. There's only one party. And yet people are loving it, from this American documentary of what was going on in Germany. And then, of course, then chronicled the rise of the American Bund with 500,000 members all across the United States wearing swastikas and taking over like VFW halls and things and doing Heil Hitler. It's like we forget, or it's not that we forget, we're not old enough to remember. The people who actually knew it from firsthand experience are dead. And we have not been studying our history. And in fact, since Bill Bennett with the Reagan administration said no more civics as part of the guidelines, federal guidelines for education, we've now got a very small percentage of our schools in the United States that even teach civics, much less history of any consequence. People don't realize how fast this stuff spreads. And I think the word fascism that was used in Europe in the 30s the new word is going to be nationalism, and it means the exact same thing. And Donald Trump kicked it off yesterday. What do you think, Kenyatta?
Well, he said he's a nationalist, and he's white, isn't he?
Yeah.
Or is it orange?
No, he's white. He paints himself orange, but he's white.
You know what the counter is? You know what the counter is, though?
No.
The counter is right now they're saying that this is a political stunt, and it was probably perpetrated by the Dems because they're desperate, because they know they're losing in the midterms as a result of some of the polls that came out yesterday. Oh, they've already got the machine working. Yeah. But let me tell you something about our history, Tom. I don't need a civics lesson in this ugly and worst part of American history because I'm a case study in it, and I've been living with it for over half a century.
You mean being born black in America?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm guessing.
I didn't forget about it. I didn't forget.
I'm guessing there are very few people who are African American in the United States, or and probably more broadly Hispanic, Asian, and perhaps even Jewish, who don't realize what's going on at some level. And
Did
what
you see the Andrew Gillum ad?
Yeah, I played it yesterday on the air. Or
oh my God.
Played the first part, the first 15 seconds of it, is Andrew, I don't even want to try it. It was terrible. And
unbelievable.
And this is, you're absolutely right. This is white nationalism come to America in a big way. This is Sinclair Lewis, it can't happen here. This is fascism coming to the United States, carrying the flag, holding a cross, and spouting from the Bible. Kenyatta, thanks for the call. Here we are. It's happening right in front of us. It's been building for years. We saw, like Bill O'Reilly encouraging it against abortion doctors. Now it's against all of us who are Democrats.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And now, CNN under attack, and apparently even Debbie Wasserman Schultz and perhaps Governor Cuomo, where the reports are coming in. More bombs. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support.
Hey, Tom. This is Rob Moitosa, a long-time listener from a long time ago.
Oh, great. Thank you, Rob.
Anyway, yeah, I wanted to talk about, people that are not speaking up. Like one of the main fall guys for the right is always George Soros. He's supposed to be funding the caravans now and stuff. I have never seen George Soros on any news show or talk show. I don't even know what he looks like, and I consider myself pretty well informed. Why is he not coming out and refuting the right? I mean, if people don't speak up,
because the minute you rebut it, you start a whole new news cycle, and you actually strengthen the meme. But the reality is this was a Republican member of Congress or candidate for Congress, Matt Gaetz, I think was his name, down in Florida, who came out and said this, and it's a flat-out lie. It's just a complete lie. And it's being echoed now. It's bounced all over the right-wing echo chamber. It was echoed on Fox so-called news, et cetera. But this is just another racist lie. And, of course, George Soros was not born in the United States. He was born in Hungary. He escaped. He survived the Holocaust. He came to the United States after World War II was over and made his fortune. He's a rags to riches story, and made his fortune principally trading in currencies. And he does give millions of dollars to progressive causes, principally what he calls the Open Society Project, which is encouraging small d democracy in other countries, which is one of the reasons Viktor Orban in Hungary, which is where Soros is originally from, is really going after him because Viktor Orban has killed democracy in Hungary, and then of course Soros is Jewish, and that's the principal subtext. I mean, it used to be the Rothschilds, who I don't think are even Jewish, but their name kind of sounds that way, right? But Soros is definitely Jewish, and he's rich, and yeah, he has given money to some Democratic politicians or causes or whatever, but he is nothing compared to Shelley Adelson or the Koch brothers, or who's the guy and his Rebecca and Robert Mercer, who funded Trump. I mean, there's the DeVos family, worth billions and billions of dollars. I mean,
but what I'm saying is, couldn't he go on some of these news shows and refute the claims of the right? I mean, if they're telling lies about him, why is he not speaking up?
Because the minute you say, no, that's not me, no, I didn't do it, then they say, well, what did you do? And, where did you, and didn't you act? I mean, it's just, when somebody tells an absolute lie about you, Rob, I mean, yeah, the open, Soros's organization has rebutted this by press release. And that rebuttal is, I've seen it included in articles in both the Washington Post and the New York Times. So it's making it into the press. But he's not going to go on TV and be provoked by a crazy right-wing, lying sack of Republican excrement down in Florida. I mean, there's no need for it.
To me, it seems like they've silenced him,
No, he's probably scared to death right now. I mean, he gets death threats. Thanks a lot for the call, Rob. He gets. It's getting scary. This is amazing. I mean, CNN in New York, bomb threats. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. Really? Apparently. We're here. It's now. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Terry in Chicago. Hey, Terry. Thanks for listening to WCPT. What's up?
Terry, that's me?
Yeah, it's you.
Is that correct? Okay. The reason I was unsure, it's Ventura, California, Tom, okay?
Oh,
Not
you're calling
Chicago.
from Ventura, California?
Right, exactly.
Oh, I don't know why it says Chicago. Okay. Oh, well.
So I don't know either. It's a pleasure to talk to you, Tom. The reason I'm calling, I wanted to follow up on that horrible ad you showed by the Republicans, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One thing about Soros, I don't even think he feels safe in Hungary any longer.
Oh, he can't go to Hungary. Orban would have him arrested. But Soros's picture was in that ad.
I hear that, yeah, but I suggest there might be a connection between Orban and Sebastian Gorka. He's a Trump Nazi, okay?
Yeah, who's also Hungarian. Wouldn't surprise me in the least.
Okay, but the point I wanted to make through, okay, I paused the ad that you displayed and to see who sponsors it, and it's sponsored by Future America 45, I believe, okay?
Yep.
And I like to show who's responsible for this garbage. And this is 2016 data. It's on Oprah Secrets. I don't know how they go through and find out.
They pull it from FEC records and IRS records that are public.
Okay, so this is pretty reliable data. Open Secrets accesses it?
Yes.
Okay, and the reason I wanted to see who sponsors this is 2016. I imagine it's pretty much the same donors who put in that horrible violence-prone ad. Well, anyway, it's the dark money comes from the Adelsons to the tune of like $15 million. Let's see, coal is a big source of money. I am surprised some of the Republicans I thought were less than horrible people. The McMahon family from Connecticut, she ran for Senate. I didn't think she was quite that crazy.
Isn't she now the secretary of something? That's big-time wrestling, folks. She's in Trump's cabinet.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I don't remember which title she has, but she's in Trump's cabinet, yeah.
Paul Singer, my comment. What about shaming these people? My home state is Michigan, and this guy had been the chair of the Washington County Republican Party. Supposedly not crazy, but he is head of a real estate agent in Ann Arbor. What about shaming these people? I'm shocked to know that he's on the list of this Future 45 organization that funded that ad.
Yeah.
What do you think about going to the locally and shaming these people to know that they would
I think, in order to shame somebody, Terry, they have to be capable of feeling shame. And I think a lot of these people aren't. They are these billionaires are so insulated. They live in such bubbles. They're so surrounded by yes men and women. This is the story of Donald Trump as well. They literally end up having no shame. They think that they can write the rules. By the way, Louise just came and told me that it's been reported that Eric Holder also has received a bomb or something that might be a bomb in the mail. I mean, this is apparently a big day for the killers on the right. Terry, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. Dana in High Point, North Carolina. Hey, Dana, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just got to say that decades before Putin attacked our election process, we were influenced by a foreign power. For 20 years, the Australian Rupert Murdoch has been doing everything he can to be the author and the dedicated, relentless driver of our descent into fascism.
I agree.
They are the original fake news and always have been.
And this is why Kevin Rudd wrote this piece for the Sydney Morning Herald a few weeks ago called "The Cancer at the Core of Australian Democracy, Rupert Murdoch."
Perfect.
And Kevin Rudd is a former prime minister.
Yes, so he should know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and stochastic terrorism, I mean, they're the author of that and the driver of it, as all the examples you gave shown. And they literally trained Donald Trump for 8 years during the Obama administration to not believe his birth, to hate everything he did, to the point that Trump is now reversing everything that Obama did. Where did he learn that from? Fox News. Fox propaganda is what's running this country now. Trump listens to, Fox and Friends. He tweets out any lie that Hannity promotes. Hannity is as much running the country as Trump is.
And then the Republicans run around to try to make the lies true. As somebody on Fox says, gee, there should be a 10% tax cut for working people. That would go over well. Trump then announces it at a rally and with a tweet. And so then a Republican congressman says, okay, I got to write a resolution. Now, a resolution has no legal force whatsoever. It's not a law. It's simply a statement. I'm going to write a resolution saying that we want to have a 10% tax cut for the average working person, thus making Trump not a liar anymore. I mean, it's bizarre what's going on. And you're right. So much of this starts right there with Fox so-called news.
Yeah, and Trump doesn't read anything or learn anything or even listen to the information from his intelligence. He listens to Fox News. That's his entire school from which he learns.
Yeah, and this is a damn scary thing. Dana, I want to get one more call in here before the end of the hour. Thank you for the call. Anita in San Antonio. Hey, Anita, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Yeah, I think it's a problem when we demonize people or we turn them into some sort of evil caricature. Mm-hmm. And I'm very concerned about why somebody would send a bomb to Debbie Wasserman Schultz or Andrew Cuomo, because those are people that are not typically demonized on the right. They don't even know who Debbie Wasserman Schultz is, probably.
Oh, so unless the bomber's from Florida.
Well, possibly, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I mean, I just don't...
Actually, she was the head of the DNC. I mean, typically the people who hate Debbie Wasserman Schultz are the people who are part of the Bernie campaign, if that was your point, Anita. I don't think we should demonize or turn them into evil caricatures. If you don't agree with them, that's one thing. But she was turned into some sort of caricature. She was turned into somebody who was trying to destroy Bernie Sanders. Yeah. So I think I just want to keep that in mind, because we need to be careful before we I don't think the language that was used to describe Debbie Wasserman Schultz is anything close. I did not. And I heard nothing close to they're going to destroy your lives. They're going to take over your country. No, Anita. They were told, some people on the left were told that she was stealing the election from Bernie. She was, was the evil. In some ways she was.
But
but that's not going to provoke a terrorist attack. I mean, that's political dirty tricks. Yeah, okay. Anita, we're not going to resolve this. And like I keep saying, I don't want to do the Hillary-Bernie wars anymore. Please, let's not try to re-incite that kind of crap, Anita. Please, please. Bye. We'll be back. Stick around. Back in just a few minutes here after the news at the top of the hour with Mark Pocan.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. As several thousand Central American migrants cross Mexico toward the U.S. is necessarily much better. Mexican federal police were sent to the Guatemalan border last week before the caravan's arrival.
Today we're reading The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence by Michael D'Antonio. This is from the first chapter.
Is a researcher for Amnesty International.
For decades, Pence had presented himself as a humble servant who could be entrusted with power because he was at heart a mild-mannered Midwesterner. Friends and foes alike said his major character trait was extreme niceness. When given the opportunity, Pence described himself as a true Hoosier, son of Indiana, who was a Christian, a conservative, and a Republican in that order. This is how he had introduced himself to the country at the Republican National Convention 6 months earlier. The list contrasted with the usual pledge politicians make to put country first. This is what President Obama did after the 2016 election when he said, "We are not Democrats first, we are not Republicans first, we are Americans first." The vice president's self-declared identity revealed both his priorities and the source of his power. For 30 years, he had helped lead the Republican Party into a closer alliance with preachers who were turning evangelical Christianity from a religion into a political crusade that engaged in a culture war with non-believers. The aim of many was to destroy abortion rights, roll back the equality gained by gay citizens, and prepare the nation for the second coming of Christ. Pence and others used martial metaphors and considered themselves warriors of the Christian right, both besieged and called upon to fight. Quote, "Those who would have us ignore the battle being fought over life, marriage, and religious liberty have forgotten the lessons of history," said Pence in 2010. America's darkest moments have come when economic arguments trumped moral principles. Pence's allies in his war included hugely wealthy donors who, despite their vast wealth accumulated at a time of historic inequality, also posed as victims. As libertarians in the mold of Ayn Rand's cardboard characters, they felt inhibited in the pursuit of even greater riches by a government that imposed foolish regulations and would redistribute their wealth to the supposedly indolent poor. Starting with this perspective, they denied the science behind environmental protection, demanded tax cuts for themselves, and insisted on massive reductions in programs serving anyone who wasn't rich. The victimhood claimed by both the libertarians and the Christian right permitted the construction of an alternative reality that denied their own power and masked their ambition to make politics and culture conform to an ideology that included white Christian supremacy and predatory capitalism. It also denied the progress they had made in their construction of their own political might. With his oath of office, Vice President Pence became both the free marketer's hero and the most successful Christian supremacist in American history. Most of Pence's life had been preparation for this moment, and possibly one more. His lifelong goal, set when he was a boy, was the Oval Office itself. Remarkably, he had reached this point by tying his fate to Donald J. Trump, a man whose immorality in the form of lying, cheating, and deceiving in every aspect of his life, from his marriage to his businesses, had made him a living exemplar of everything that Christianity and conservatism abhorred. However, this record also suggested that Pence was more likely to assume the highest office in the land than most vice presidents who had come before. To put it bluntly, Trump was vulnerable to impeachment. If this occurred, Pence would see the hand of God at work in his elevation to the presidency. In the meantime, he would wait and watch. On Inauguration Day, with Pence looking on, a slightly stooped Donald Trump stepped forward when it was his turn to face the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, John Roberts. Beside Trump stood his wife, Melania, the former fashion model, who held two Bibles, Lincoln's and Trump's own. At the stroke of noon, the president-elect raised his right hand and placed his left on the Bibles. As he did this, Trump's family members and hundreds of political and government figures strained to see the moment. Trump and Pence were a study in contrasts. At age 58, Pence appeared trim, perhaps even athletic, and could have passed for a man 10 years younger. His jacket was neatly buttoned, his hands were clasped at his waist, and his smooth face was set in a half smile. Mere feet away, in some, he resembled a small-town pastor, or maybe even a funeral director. Mere feet away, a stern-faced 70-year-old Trump stood with his coat hanging open like a caftan to reveal a long red necktie. Despite much cosmetic intervention, he looked old and tired. At the conclusion of the presidential oath, which had been voiced by 44 presidents before him, Trump said the words, "So help me God," and accepted the congratulations of those closest to him with a thin-lipped, toothless grin. He then delivered a 15-minute speech replete with distortions and falsehoods that were his trademark. He declared that America was awash with crime and despair and under constant attack. "This American carnage stops right here and stops right now," said Trump. It was the most remembered phrase of the address. That was some weird S-word, former President George W. Bush was heard to remark as he left the inaugural stand. Weird was the mildest word that one could attach to the 45th President of the United States as he launched an administration that would be stained by scandal and corruption so broad it defied a citizen's ability to grasp. Cronyism, secrecy, and nepotism would flourish. Presidential lies, daily cataloged by the Washington Post and others, would come at the rate of more than 150 per month. From the moment of his oath, Mike Pence, the vice president, faced the historic, some would say daunting, challenge of dealing with an erratic and undisciplined commander-in-chief. The book, The Shadow President, The Truth About Mike Pence. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. I just retweeted Lawrence Tribe's tweet. His Twitter handle is Tribe, @TribeLaw. Lawrence Tribe, the constitutional lawyer and author and whatnot. He says every single recipient of the bomb packages, Soros, Obama, Clinton, Wasserman Schultz, Holder, and CNN, every single one of them has been the target of Trump's vicious comments at his raucous rallies. He didn't light the fire, of course, and he's condemning it, but he brought the kindling and the matches. Louise, you need to put Congressman Pocan on so I can put him on the air, please. Congressman Mark Pocan will be with us in just a moment. It's going to be middays with Mark. He'll be taking your calls for the hour. Louise? Yeah, she's talking to somebody. Nate, if you could. I'm sorry, Congressman. I know you can hear me, but I can't put you on the air until the right button gets pushed in the back office, in the back room here. Congressman Mark Pocan, his website is pocan.house.gov. And there we go, pocan.house.gov. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He'll be with us for the hour, taking your calls at 202-808-9925. And Congressman Pocan, I've been ranting here about stochastic terrorism, about what happened, what typically is referred to as hate speech, and actually most countries have fairly rigorous laws against hate speech, even in a political context. Apparently, we don't, and I'm just curious your thoughts on these bombs and whatnot.
Yeah, well, this is, Donald Trump being the most unpresidential president we've had, at least in my lifetime. He still thinks he's a reality show star. He still thinks that it's about ratings. He still thinks it's about how many people watch him on TV, and the more sensational you are, the more people might be intrigued by what could happen next, when he's now the president of the most powerful country on the planet, and he has to start acting accordingly, and he hasn't. He still has nicknames for people. He still says things that are outright lies and over the top, that are extremely sensationalistic. And, I was at a high school this morning and literally asked by someone who's in high school how we can bring more bipartisanship out. And we have a president who, gives people nicknames like Pocahontas and Lying This and, everything else. Kids get it. We need this president to get it, to kind of stop the man-childness behavior and realize that we've got a different way to have discourse. You can disagree without being disagreeable, but you can't just incite people to the point that all of a sudden when they may do something because someone is a bit unhinged, you got to expect that could happen when you're going for ratings and not going for being presidential.
Yeah. Oh, man. Very well said. Let's. Is there anything you wanted to cover before we pick up some phone calls?
Why don't we just go right to the phone calls? There's always a lot going on, but I think your listeners always have great questions.
Okay. Zach in North Hollywood, California. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Good morning, Tom and Mark. The head stochastic terrorists for the last 20 years have been Rush, Hannity, and Murdoch. I think we all know that. Mitch McConnell says we're an angry mob. Well, correction. We're a conscious, lawful majority, and we have the right to be angry because we're sick of watching a corrupt minority take away our future that provides international cover-ups and security for killers, subsidies for outdated, dirty energy as they continue to comfort the comfortable and afflict the afflicted. We got a clear right to be angry after 30 years of stochastic terrorism. Question for you guys. How hard would it be to reform the FCC back to where it was, and how about this, that we can protect against hate speech and provide, security for our interconnectedness?
Yeah, Zach, great question. I think, we're balancing the First Amendment rights of free speech, which, as a member of the ACLU, I strongly support. And even when I don't like what someone has to say, they often have a right to say it. But there's also the balance of Donald Trump is the president of the United States. He has a different role than when he was selling detergent during his show Celebrity Apprentice and had to be sensationalistic for 40-some minutes an hour so that people would buy more suds. And he hasn't made the transition yet. And he really seems to like that part of his base that really loves the red meat. That's why he's doing all the rallies. But this isn't being president of the United States. You have a different role when you're the president than when you are the main actor on Celebrity Apprentice, and he's not made that transition. So, we really need him to step up. Put the Twitter down. We can disagree. And I will disagree with him strongly on many issues, and you pointed out a number of them. But it doesn't have to happen in the tone and rhetoric that's happening now, because this will incite people. And eventually, if it's not these cases today, it's going to be something else down the road, and we just need to do better as a country because people across the world look to us to be better.
Joe in Long Beach, California. You're on with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, good afternoon. Do you remember when President Obama was running his campaign, 2008 or 2012, he went out with a national ad. Basically, it was his closing argument to run for president. I kind of believe that the DNC needs to do the same thing. We need to appeal directly, eye to eye through a camera to our constituents, the millennials, the seniors. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Joe, I think you make a really strong argument because, Donald Trump is doing it. His closing argument is mobs, caravans, immigration, a lot of fear he's putting out there because fear is a great, great motivator. But we have issues that I think are more substantive issues that I can tell you people everywhere I travel and help candidates out come up to be number one and number two issues all the time. Health care. People are deadly afraid that they're going to lose access to health care because it's an absolute economic certitude. They have to have that or else they can't support their family. Social Security and Medicare. My 89-year-old mom, 10 days ago, we moved into assisted living. And when you talk to her and other people who live in centers like that, they're relying on this for their life. And the fact that anyone would want to put that into Wall Street and let them, roll the wheel and see if they can make money on it scares people quite a bit. We should be talking about how we can make people rest assured that we will protect those items. We'll make sure that more people have access to health care. And, of course, I would love to see single-payer Medicare for all. But there's a lot of different ways we can do it. But we have to put those issues out there because people agree with us on the issues. They may be scared by what Donald Trump is saying, but then we can bring people back to really what is most personal to them. It's not a caravan that's in the southern part of Mexico. It's whether or not they have health insurance for their family. And I think you're right. We need to make that case very directly and with our best spokesperson, and right now it probably still is Barack Obama.
Omar in Herndon, Virginia. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Tom, thanks so much for taking my call and greeting to Mr. Pocan. I just have two questions. The first one, immigration is a very sensitive issue. How do you recommend that Democrats work around this caravan situation? And the second question, what is our 50-state strategy to win the House, the Senate, and the 2020 election? Thank you.
Yeah, so on immigration, what I've been saying anyway is, we had a bill that 2 sessions ago got about 70 votes in the Senate in a bipartisan way. Was it perfect? No, but it was a comprehensive bill to address immigration reform, from some extra security at the border to a pathway for citizenship for aspiring Americans. Let's start with that. The House didn't take it up, the Republicans in the House at the time, because the Tea Party couldn't get it on the floor. Because of this, we aren't moving forward on this issue. The answer is not a border, but we do have to address the 13 million people that are here currently, and we have to address when people do come to the border to make sure that we've got the right protections in place. So I think you've got to go to something like that, but then also share the very stories of why people come. We are a nation of immigrants. We have people right now coming with fair claims of asylum, and they're not allowed the process that's required by international law that we're violating because of Donald Trump and his rhetoric around the wall. So I just think we have to, first of all, depoliticize the issue, which is going to be difficult because the president only makes it a political issue, and then appeal to where we once were not that long ago, a couple sessions ago, with a comprehensive bill.
And start clearly separating immigrants from refugees, eh?
Absolutely, absolutely, and the whole Middle Eastern rhetoric has just been off the top.
Yeah. This is tough stuff. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. It's Middays with Mark, Wednesday, second hour edition. And you can check out his website, pocan.house.gov. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And we will be right back with more of your calls for Congressman Pocan in just a moment. And welcome back. Monty in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thanks so much for taking my call. Tom, I actually tagged you in an article saying that Trump and the GOP are the very definition of an angry mob. And my question for the congressman is, Hillary Clinton, now I know the Secret Service was there, but we're seeing Heather Heyer was murdered by a Trump supporter, the Waffle House shooter, the Florida school shooter, 5 journalists in Maryland were murdered by Trump supporters. When are the Democrats in unison going to come out and condemn Trump and saying he is inciting and encouraging violence? I can have a party in my house and serve alcohol to someone, and if I don't cut them off and they go out and they get into an accident, I could be held responsible. More and more people are going to die every day that Trump is in office, and the GOP and the right wing are encouraging this.
Right. Well, I mean, I have heard people push back. It may not be the sexiest thing that the corporate news programs put on the air, but I mean, people have pushed back and said you've got to stop the rhetoric for a long time. I mean, we've been dealing with this, but you know, unfortunately, today has happened. Fortunately, this may wake some people up. But, you know, there's no question. I've said this many times. He's the most unpresidential president we've had in our history. Even if I disagree with him on policy issues, he can behave differently. And Republicans also think that. And we need Republicans to stand up to him and say the same thing that Democrats already are saying.
Amen. Albert in Marina Del Rey, California. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Congressman, I have a question about more suggestion / question about trade, and then one follow-up question about the speakership. The question / suggestion is, how come we don't have a minimum wage, federal minimum wage included in our trade bills? Because our industries have to comply by that. So other industries outside of our country should also have to comply by that minimum wage rule. And then secondly, who will the progressive Democrats be putting up for Speaker of the House? Thank you.
Sure, Albert. Excuse me. On the first one, I'm sorry. What was the first question again? The second question, let me answer, and I'll come back to the first. Sure. You know, we're going to see what happens November 6th with where the majority's at and where the people that just got elected are, and we have to figure out within our caucus that. I don't know if there's a natural name to say who's going to be put up as Speaker. I would argue that Nancy Pelosi is pretty progressive already. However, there are plenty of other conversations that are going to come into play when we get to that point. I'm sorry, what was the first question again?
First question was, why not have minimum labor wage standards in our trade deals?
Yes, and we've actually organized labor, and those of us who watch trade very closely have all along advocated for that, and that is part of the discussion with Mexico, specifically around the auto industry. That I think it's a $16 wage that we've, the language that actually the Trump administration.
For a small percentage of their workers.
Right, for a small percentage of the work, but we would love to see it much higher across the board. One of our problems with the TPP is, you know, when the wage there is literally pocket change an hour, you can't compete. So we want to see stronger labor protections, provisions that would also lift those wages, because otherwise we're going to continue to lose jobs. So you're right, although we don't have maybe the same control over other countries' laws on that front.
Cool. We'll be back with more of your questions for Congressman Mark Pocan and more of his answers to your questions in just a moment. It's the Thom Hartmann Program. It's Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. Talk media for the sane among us. We'll be right back. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Program. Thank you. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us taking your calls. And JC in San Francisco, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Good morning, Mark. Good morning, Tom. Congressman, would you be willing to support, we have a rare opportunity in California to replace one Democratic senator for another, And I'm talking about Dianne Feinstein's seat being up for re-election, and Kevin De Leon, the 51-year-old Speaker of the Democratic House in Sacramento, California, is running for her seat. And he's considered a progressive Democrat. He just signed a bill and co-sponsored a bill that Governor Brown signed that would make California 100% renewable energy by 2045. Excuse me. And I'm just wondering if we really need an 85-year-old billionaire Republican to remain in office who's really kind of a day late and a dollar short in most cases. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, JC, I'll be honest, my hands are more than full in the House races, and into that really more in a few key races where we got progressives around the country and the upper Midwest where I've been traveling. So I couldn't give you an informed answer because I haven't watched that race close enough, and I don't know the gentleman running enough to give you an answer that I think would be fair to you. So sorry, I don't have a strong opinion on that, JC.
Chris in Oakland, California, listening on AM 910. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Congressman, thank you for being here on the phone with us today. It's pretty obvious to me that people who are committing these acts, sending these packages, are doing so because they're scared and they're desperate. They're becoming desperate. These are not the acts of rational, confident people. Are you sensing a palpability of that anxiety in your Republic cultist colleagues in the House, or are they putting the same brave face on privately to you as to the extent that you deal with them that they seem to be putting on in the media? And I thank you very much, and I take my answer up here. I just want to encourage people to stay strong and stand your ground and be sure and vote. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So I think when you talk to many rank-and-file Republicans privately, they also don't like the tone, especially if they've been around for a while, because, George Bush didn't do this, Barack Obama didn't do this, Bill Clinton didn't do this, go down the list. This is a very different presidency with someone who I think, really is closest to being a reality star in many ways than an elected official, and he operates in a different way. And they know that it's toxic to our public discourse. So I just wish that Paul Ryan, who once in a while during the campaign said something that showed he actually cared and got it, he's been MIA ever since Donald Trump got elected. So that's been our problem. When Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan don't stand up for their separate co-equal branch of government, we're not going to hear it on the news media, and many of the conversations are private conversations by Republicans who also have great disgust for this level of toxicity.
Lowell in Salem, Oregon. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Congressman Pocan and Tom. I wanted to get your thoughts on the 2014 study by Martin Gillens and Benjamin Page that showed that the will of the average voters has zero impact on policy. And to kind of counterpoint that with, how do we actually get things moving and done when, like, for example, like our Occupy movement was able to accomplish nothing. Our anti-Iraq war they still went into Iraq. So it's like we have no impact on anything that happens.
Yeah, so Lowell, I'm not familiar with the 2014 Gillens Page study that you're referring to, but I can just tell you from doing this for 25 years, I have seen when people speak out and they do it in an effective way, they have a voice. I would argue while Occupy was probably one of the early movements that was out there, the movement right now is significantly different with groups like Indivisible and Move On and DFA and others that are doing just an amazing job in connecting people to their elected officials. I mean, Indivisible really has been the breakout group, I think, of this presidency in letting people who live in Wisconsin call a key district in California to people who live in that district to call their representative. That's very scientific, technical, smart ways to influence people. And I've seen things not come to fruition that the Republicans wanted to do because of that. So I would argue my practical experience from watching this is if the people lead, eventually the leaders will follow. Leaders aren't always the first to do it, but they do it after enough people have brought them to the point they have no other choice. I think we now have the tools in place to make that happen. So So I'm actually very optimistic that if we take the majority, if we take it by 5, it's going to be more difficult, right? I mean, I'll even say I've got probably a good 10 or 15 people in my caucus that prefer to spend life in the fetal position, rocking in the corner of a floor. I wish they would do more. So it gets tough with 5-seat majority, but if you have a 25-seat majority and you've got people doing what they need to, I think we can have some real change.
There you go. And which is why we all need to be sure to get out to vote and get all our friends out to vote and do everything we can to get out to vote. Congressman Mark Pocan is with us, taking your calls for the hour. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. He represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin in the U.S. House of Representatives. His website is pocan.house.gov, and you can tweet him at @RepMarkPocan.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of Middays with Mark right after this. Today we're reading from Martha Nussbaum's new book, The Monarchy of Fear, a philosopher looks at our political crisis. This is from the introduction. There's a lot of fear around in the U.S. today, and this fear is often mingled with anger, blame, and envy. Fear all too often blocks rational deliberation, poisons hope, and impedes constructive cooperation for a better future. What is today's fear about? Well, many Americans feel themselves powerless, out of control of their own lives. They fear that the American dream, the hope that our children will flourish and do even better than you have done, has died, and that everything has slipped away from them. These feelings have their basis in real problems, among others, income stagnation in the lower middle class, alarming declines in the health and longevity of members of this group, especially men, and the escalating costs of higher education at the very time that a college degree is increasingly required for employment. But real problems are difficult to solve, and their solutions take long, hard study and cooperative work toward an uncertain future. It can consequently seem all too attractive to convert that sense of panic and impotence into blame and the othering of outsider groups such as immigrants, racial minorities, and women. They have taken our jobs, or wealthy elites have stolen our country. The problems that globalization and automation create for working-class Americans are real, deep, and seemingly intractable. Rather than face those difficulties and uncertainties, people who sense their standard of living declining can instead grasp after villains, and a fantasy takes shape. If we can somehow keep them out, build a wall, or keep them in their place in subservient positions, we can regain our pride and, for men, their masculinity. Fear leads then to aggressive othering strategies rather than to useful analysis. At the same time, fear also runs rampant among people on the left who seek greater social and economic equality and the vigorous protection of hard-won rights for women and minorities. Many people who are dismayed by the election are reacting to it as if the end of the world is at hand. A majority of my students, many acquaintances, many colleagues feel and say often with anguish that our democracy is on the verge of collapse, that the new administration is unprecedented in its willingness to cater to racism, misogyny, and homophobia. They fear especially for the possible collapse of democratic freedoms, speech, travel, association, the press. My younger students especially think that the America they know and love is about to disappear. Rather than analyze matters soberly and listen to other people trying to sort things through, they often demonize an entire half of the American electorate, portraying them as monsters, enemies of everything good. As in the book of Revelation, these are the last days when a righteous remnant must contend against satanic forces. We all need first to take a deep breath and recall our history. When I was a little girl, African Americans were being lynched in the South. Communists were losing their jobs. Women were just barely beginning to enter prestigious universities in the workforce, and sexual harassment was a ubiquitous offense that had no laws to deter it. Jews could not win partnerships in major law firms. Gays and lesbians, criminals under law, were almost always in the closet. People with disabilities had no rights in public space and public education. Transgender was a category that had as yet no name. America was far from beautiful. These facts tell us two things my students need to know. First, the America for which they are nostalgic never existed, not fully. It was a work in progress, a set of dynamic aspirations put in motion by tough work, cooperation, hope, and solidarity over a long period of time. A just and inclusive America never was, and is not yet a fully achieved reality. Second, this present moment may look like backsliding from our march toward human equality, but it's not the apocalypse, and it's actually a time when hope and work can accomplish a great deal of good. On both left and right, panic doesn't just exaggerate our dangers, it also makes our moment much more dangerous than it would otherwise be, more likely to lead to genuine disasters. It's like a bad marriage in which fear, suspicion, and blame displace careful thought about what the real problems are and how to resolve them. Instead, those emotions taking over become their own problem and prevent constructive work, hope, listening, and cooperation. When people are afraid of one another and of an unknown future, fear easily gives rise to scapegoating, to fantasies of payback, and to a poisonous envy of the fortunate, whether those victorious in the election or those dominant socially and economically. We all remember FDR's statement that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. We recently heard departing President Obama say, democracy can buckle when we give in to fear. Roosevelt was wrong if we take his words literally. Although we had reason to fear fear, we certainly had many other things to fear in his time, such as Nazism, hunger, and social conflict. Fear of those evils was rational, and to that extent, we should not fear our fear, though we should always examine it. But Obama's more precise and modest statement is surely right. Giving way to fear, which means drifting with its currents, refusing skeptical examination, is surely dangerous. We need to think hard about fear and where fear is leading us. After taking a deep breath, we all need to understand ourselves as well as we can, using that moment of detachment to figure out where fear and related emotions come from and where they are leading us. But you might not be concerned so far that fear is really a deep problem for democratic self-government. And then she goes into a dialogue about that. The Monarchy of Fear by Martha Nussbaum. All aboard! It's a once-in-a-lifetime luxury Alaskan cruise on the Regent Seven Seas Mariner, July 24th, 2019. For more information, Keen Luxury Travel, 800-856-1155. And did I mention we'll be getting active on board with special events with yours truly, me and Louise, as we visit Ketchikan, Juneau, Skagway, Sitka, Hubbard Glacier, and Anchorage.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back. It's Middays with Mark, Wednesday, second hour edition. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. Pocan.house.gov is his website. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin, and you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. Stephen in Ferndale, New York, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Stephen. Thank you.
I guess my question is pretty short. Just what do you think that we can do, and what are your plans personally to lower healthcare costs in the U.S.?
Yeah, Stephen, thanks for your question. I am a strong advocate of trying to get this country to a single-payer Medicare for all type system. Too many people in the district, in my district, and other districts that I visit, this is like the number one issue coming up for their economic security. If they don't have health insurance, they don't feel like they're economically secure as a family. And not that long ago, if you had a pre-existing condition, you couldn't get health insurance. I call that profit insurance, and we need to get to that. So along the way, we're going to do everything we can. It probably first and foremost, we have to shore up all the damage that's happened by President Trump and the Republicans to the Affordable Care Act. But if you have a $5,000 deductible and you're making $35,000 a year, you can't do that. That's not affordable health insurance. So we have to work on things like that. We have to get this country to look health-wise more like Canada and most of civilized Europe. And I think that's my goal. I think that's the single best way you do that. You take away all the overhead. You take away the paperwork costs. You take away the advertising costs. You take away the profit incentives for insurance companies, and you really will lower the cost of health care, and make it more accessible. And that's exactly where we need to move as a country.
Yeah, and you used the example of $35,000 a year. $33,000 a year is the median income in the United States. Half of all people make less than that. So, I mean, that's not like, we're not talking about some small subset of the American populace here.
Yeah.
Incredible. Daniel in Socorro, New Mexico, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Thank you. My question is, what is going to happen when these refugees hit our border? I live here in Socorro, and New Mexico. I was just in Veracruz for a vacation, and I saw like a young 14-year-old male dressed in clothes like he was from Guatemala. He was dead in the side of the road. And unlike the Good Samaritan, I didn't stop to give him water. He was already dead, I could see. But I told the guards at the entrance of the park that I was hiking in. So what's going to happen? What are the Democrats planning to do when the refugees hit the border? Thank you.
Yeah, hi Daniel. Thanks for the question, and I understand too. At least from listening to the radio this morning, I always when I'm driving in, I listen to both Fox and MSNBC radio because it's on just to see what they're talking about for the day. And on Fox, they're talking about a new caravan from El Salvador. Right? They love the caravan conversation. For us, I mean, we have to do comprehensive immigration reform. Short of that, we've got to address the issues as they come up. By the time that caravan hits, and don't forget, some people are going to stay in Mexico along the way and won't make it to the border for other reasons. But by the time it hits, it's going to be about the time that we're doing the funding for the Homeland Security, and they will, I think, very likely, especially if we take the majority, try to use it to have funding for the wall. So we're going to have to address that. We're going to need people to be there to help us on the calls when that time comes. But I'm expecting a very robust lame duck period, this being one of the main issues in addition to the wall. We've been able to hold back funding with Republicans' help up to this point because even most of them privately tell you they know it's ridiculous. But I'm fearful that when this gets here, there's going to be a real push. So I think in the short term, that's what we got to deal with. In the long term, we absolutely have to get to comprehensive immigration reform that also provides for a pathway to citizenship for aspiring Americans. 13 million people here need us to address that in a comprehensive way.
Harold in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
I'm on the air?
You are, Harold.
You are. Oh, okay. I just want to talk about single-payer insurance. I just got, a month ago, I got back from a trip to Germany, and unfortunately, I forgot, I ran out of a couple of medications. And so I went to a pharmacy in Germany and got the medication. And there's one I got to take for diabetes and one for the heart. So I do have some problems. But anyway, so I purchased those since I'm not insured in Germany, so I had to buy the medication, and it was American medication, American made. Same medication I'm getting here, so and they come in prepackaged, not like here.
Yeah, they're typically in blister packs in Germany.
Right, correct. So I got those 30-day supplies, so 1 month supply. That one medication I got for the diabetes was. Cost me 44 euros, which is maybe $58, something like that. I paid the last time I picked that medication up here $400 some. And the other one was for the heart, same thing, 30-day supply. I paid $48, so about 60 or 62 euros, about 60 or 62 dollars. I paid almost $800 for that medication here, and it's the same thing. It's the same medication, and made in America.
Right. It's a horror story, Harold. What's your question for Congressman Pocan?
The question is that we must go to a single-payer insurance. That's where the prices come from. And the American company that sold those medications in Europe, they did not sell them at a loss. You know?
No, they wouldn't be in the marketplace if they had. Congressman Pocan, your thoughts on this? Thank you, Harold.
Yeah, so, I mean, Harold, I completely agree why we need to move to a single payer, but also let me just add, on the prescription drug front, we also, I think, can walk and chew gum at the same time, because I think that one we can address hopefully quicker. There's no question that pharmaceutical companies, many of them, are ripping off the American public at an incredible rate. What you just gave are two great examples. We had a press conference when Pfizer was going to buy an Irish company through a legal loophole, not pay U.S. taxes. We put a list of all the drugs, some major drugs they have, what they charge in Ireland and what they charge in the U.S. In some cases, it was 1/20th of the cost for the same drug. There's no reason we should be ripped off, and we need to be much more aggressive in fighting this. And a statistic that I have used, and I think it's important for us to use, between 2006 and 2010, of the 200-plus drugs that were approved by the FDA, all of them had part of their research was paid for by our tax dollars through the National Institute of Health, the NIH. So they can't tell you all that money is for research and development, because a lot of your tax money is going to that, and then they rip you off when you're buying the drugs in the U.S. That's exactly what we have to address.
What, again, was the time period and the number of drugs?
2006 to 2010, Tom, I'll get you the exact number. I think it's like 210 drugs, but I'll get you the exact info.
Great, thank you. I love statistics.
Yeah.
Gabe in Brunswick, Ohio, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Congressman Pocan. I have a question. My question is basically on the Consumer Protection Act and the Dodd-Frank bill, you know, the Glass-Steagall. My question is how do you plan to protect it or expand it so we all don't go broke and be unemployed and not have any money to support our families?
Another bank meltdown.
Yeah. So, Gabe, let me take it a little bit up a level if I could. You know, part of the problem we've seen is once Dodd-Frank was passed, and while that had many protections in place, and again, thankfully, Elizabeth Warren, with her expertise, was an instrumental part of getting a lot of that done, even before she was in the Senate, obviously. We've had rollbacks under this administration and this Congress. So, first, let's go back to shoring it up where we need to. And then, you know, with any time you pass a major law like that, you're going to find some areas you missed. Let's go back and get those cleaned up. But what we don't want to happen is exactly what happened in 2008 when the economy crashed hard, when, you know, banks were casinos doing things with derivatives and other practices that clearly were not in the best interest of the public and were for very short-term profits for very few in the bank. So we need to get those back in place, the Dodd-Frank regulations that have been rolled back, and then let's see what else needs to happen next. And I've been on the bill to restore Glass-Steagall, but you know, there's other things too that we can do along the way.
Congressman, we're going to hit a hard break in 25 seconds here. What do you think the chances are of any of this kind of stuff passing if the Democrats take the House even with a slim majority?
See, that is the $100,000 plus question, Tom, is, you know, if we have a 5-seat majority, it's tough. There are a good 15 people in my caucus who are nervous about everything, and it would be difficult to get them to do some actions, even though we'll show them people in their district support it. We need a good 25-seat majority to really be able to move, but with 5 or 10, we just have to be better in our communicating and working with the outside groups to move the legislators who need to be moved.
There you go. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour on Middays with Mark here on the Thom Hartmann Program. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N. His Twitter handle is @RepMarkPocan.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
And, of course, Congressman Pocan is the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus and represents the 2nd District of Wisconsin. Back with more of your calls for him in just a moment. And welcome back. Jim, Jim, I don't have a city for you. Where are you calling from?
Sammamish, Washington.
Oh, okay, great. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, good morning, guys. So can we get a little more detail on the premiums for single payer? And the reason I ask is because, you know, to attract younger people who don't view themselves as needing medical services, why would they sign up for a single payer if in their view, they're just subsidizing older people's high cost. Is there any more detail about what single-payer premiums are for different classes of people?
Yeah, so I think, part of the individual mandate with the ACA, and I wasn't there when the ACA was created, but that was to try to make sure that we had smoothing some of the costs, but the incentive was that there'd be a tax penalty, which was not especially severe if they did not sign up. Under a single payer, everyone would have access, so it's not even as if they'd have to worry about signing up or not, per se. You would have a system where they would have access to health care. Our real test, Jim, has been to get the Congressional Budget Office to give us a fiscal note on the bill for Medicare for All, because under the Republicans they have not done that. We need to get that because a lot of nonprofit groups have shown us why it's far more economical to offer health care for everyone rather than the current system that we have. We don't have that data in the most official sense, which is where we look at the CBO level. So that's our big challenge.
Yeah. Let's see here. We have 2 minutes. Jerry in Federal Way, Washington, watching us on Free Speech TV. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan. Jerry?
Hello?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Yes, that's me. I was thinking about this nationalism of Trump. It seems to me that this is a big smokescreen to cover up the stock market decline and other kind of things. Your thoughts on that?
Jerry, I think the nationalist stuff is a big old dog whistle and a coded way to tell a lot of people around this country that don't worry, he's with you for that more racist element that he needs to get out to vote for Republicans so that he doesn't have to have a Congress looking at his violations of the Emoluments Clause and how he's making money for his family business, and Congress that doesn't go after his taxes so we can find out exactly how much he's worth and where he got his money. He's trying to desperately stop that from happening to him, and he'll say or do anything. So I don't think it's even just to get a distraction from the stock market. I think it's his way of trying to get people out to vote and giving a very not so subtle coded language to those who are the white nationalists that don't worry, he's with you, although I can't imagine they didn't think so based on everything else he says, but clearly he's doing it even more overtly. Don't forget 2 years ago when he told the Russians where to get information. Now he's sending a message this way. This is how Donald Trump operates, and I think he's just doing it because that's Donald Trump.
And David Duke is ecstatic. He was ecstatically tweeting this morning. Finally he's with us. He gets it. It's the white nationalists. That's what it's all about. But do you think that we just have 10 seconds here? Do you think that if the stock market crashes between now and the election, if Democrats take the House, he'll say, "Oh, the market crashed because it was the Democrats"?
Oh, it'll be because of the caravan, because of transgender people in the caravan who happen to, it's the same old.
Yeah, he'll blame somebody other than himself, certainly, or Republican policy. Congressman Mark Pocan taking your calls for the hour. We'll be right back with more of your calls right after this. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Congressman Pocan taking your calls. And Laura in Maple Valley, Washington, you're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hello, Tom. Hello, Congressman. So I'd like to make a comparison between the gun laws, the common sense gun laws that we need in America domestically, and kind of a background check for the nations that we want to sell arms to externally too. I just wanted to leave that with you and hear your thoughts, Congressman.
Laura, interesting point. And this is exactly what we're dealing with Saudi Arabia right now, right? Not just the fact that they very likely, from the very top, were complicit with, or not complicit with, ordered the killing of someone who's been a critic in the Turkish embassy. But my concern, and Ro Khanna and others' concerns, have been around the involvement in Yemen. And every time we're more worried about the arms sales to a country like that, even though they're creating the second worst, probably, humanitarian crisis on the planet outside of Syria in Yemen, and we've been involved in some of that. So you're right. There should be standards when you're selling weapons. It's not just about the profit that you're trying to make for the defense contractors, which Donald Trump seems to care about. This is really looking at who you're selling to, and this is our leverage right now with Saudi Arabia. My guess is Donald Trump won't use that leverage, but hopefully we can find people in Congress in both parties to have that conversation, because I've seen more members of Congress vocal on this than I have seen the president.
Calling from Newcastle, Wyoming, Sunday. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Mr. Pocan. With all the people being displaced with the natural disasters, all these hurricanes, is anything being done to ensure that those people are not going to be purged on technicalities from the voter rolls, or that they, would get provisional ballots that don't count?
Sunday, that's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. Right now, especially in Florida, we've got a lot of people who are displaced. I hope that they're doing something to that front. I have not seen much on that, so I'm sorry I can't give you a good answer.
Rob in Phoenix, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Yes, Congressman Pocan. Hey, I spoke to you last week or prior about the Social Security income tax deduction, and I think you may have missed my point. What I was trying to point out is right now it's excuse me, $132.
I think it's like $129.8, I believe.
Yeah, well, it's going up to, I think, $132. But regardless of that, it's like
going up to
6.3% deduction at $132. My point was, like, if you double that cap, you would have the tax, meaning to go from 6.3 down to 3 something. If you double it again, it would go down to 1%. So basically, what you could do if you push the limit up, you could lower the tax down to like 1%. The government would still be making the same amount of money to fulfill the Social Security requirements, and that would immediately give everyone who makes $132,000 a tax break of 5% right off the bat. And also, since corporations are people, we should tag that tax onto their income tax as well.
Congressman?
Yeah, Rob. So the difference is right now we have some longevity problems with the Social Security because of the population. So we're actually trying to bring in revenue to it. So I think part of the conversation has been about lifting the cap. Again, rightfully so. It's a regressive tax when people who make, I think this year 120, or maybe it was last year 129.8. This year it might be 132. Don't pay another dime into the system. But if we lifted the cap completely, you have over 75 years of future into the Social Security fund. That is probably the most addressing problem we have right now. Not so much that we're trying to lower that tax for people; it's that you want to make sure the fund is available for people. And a lot of us would like to talk about expanding it and providing maybe an increase tied to the Consumer Price Index E, which addresses what seniors pay, 25% of their income on medications and health care, rather than the CPI, which is often focused on things like gasoline and stuff that not all seniors are spending money on. So I don't know if we're looking so much to try to cut the rate of the tax as much as keep the program alive, which is the most pressing concern.
Yeah. Congressman, we have a minute and a half before the end of the hour. Not quite enough to get another caller in here, although there are people with questions about Social Security and health care. I know that you've touched on a lot of those topics. But anyhow, what do you think we should be looking at in this next week, and how do you think that we should be best reacting to these acts of terrorism that we're experiencing right now as a nation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're less than 2 weeks from the election. It's going to get wild and woolly in the next 2 weeks. Be ready for it. But the best way to deal with that wild and woolliness is to, put some time in supporting candidates of either party that you support. Knock on doors, make phone calls, use your social media, talk to your neighbors and friends, because the election is really going to matter. We saw what happened 2 years ago. Elections have consequences. We need people to be active, and, we can do it in a respectful way. We don't have to sink down to the level that they have to sink to. We can be aggressive on the issues and still make our point, and I think appeal to a broader number of people that we need to for the election.
Yeah. And pushing back on the lies? How do we push back on their lies?
Absolutely. Well, the good news is the facts, right? We have those. When the president says he's going to cut taxes by 10% between now and the election, you just say to people, Congress isn't even in session. Like that, it's not even possible. Like that is just an outright lie. There is like 0% truth in it. I think those kind of things are fair to point out. Facts are facts.
Yeah. Amen. Congressman Pocan, thanks so much for being with us again this week.
Of course. Thank you, Tom.
It's always great talking with you. You can find his website at pocan.house.gov. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. And you can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. We're going to be back. Victoria Jones has an interesting story for us about what's going on in the UK. And we're going to check in with Talk Media News at 20 after the next hour. Plus, we'll be taking your calls and more of the news of the day.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from Seize the Time, the story of the Black Panther Party and Huey P. Newton by Bobby Seale. This is from page 85, a subchapter titled Huey Backs the Pigs Down. And there are a few words in here that I'll be filling in, as it were. They're walking, he says, one day as we were walking out of the office, I guess we'd been there about a month or so, a pig passed by. He saw us coming out of the office with shotguns and pistols on our sides. About 6 or 7 of us came out of the office there in the daytime, and we looked at the pig as he passed by, and he jumped on his radio because he saw us coming out of the office with these pieces and stuff. We had just finished field stripping weapons, learning about 00 buckshot, learning about the 9mm and the .45, and having a political education session. We had a .45 and a .357 Magnum in the group and a couple of M1s. We had 3 or 4 shotguns by then. We bought up guns like a son of a bitch then. The pig went down 2 blocks and turned around, came back up the other side of the street. They were building rapid transit, BART, right down from Grove Street there, and we went up the other side of the boulevard and came back. We readily assessed that the pigs were ready to see what the F was happening, that this pig had radioed in, and he was running it down, how he had, quote, seen some N-words come out of a place here with some guns and blop, blop, de bloop, etc., come out of this office with guns and stuff. He was radioing into other pigs to help get them. Huey had his father's car that day, and he goes through that whole thing. So anyhow, the police pull him over, and Huey got in the car, and the pig came up to the window. You have any driver's license? So Huey rolled the window down. That wasn't more than a 3 or 4 inch crack in the window. Huey handed his license out the window. Is this your true name, the pig said? And Huey said, yes, that's my true name, Huey P. Newton. Is this your true address, 841 47th Street? And Huey said, yep, that's my true address, 841 47th Street. And what are you doing with the guns? And Huey said, what are you doing with your gun? This particular pig decided he wasn't going to argue, so he went back and got his little writing pad there where they fill out S-word. Your true name is Huey P. Newton? Huey said, that's right. The pig wrote it down. Your true address is 841 47th Street? Huey said, that's right. The pig then looked at his license. What's your phone number? And Huey said, 5, and stopped and wouldn't say anything else. And the pig said, 5 what? And this is when all the S word between the pig and the party and the pigs began. Huey said, the Fifth Amendment. You ever heard of it? Don't you know about the constitutional right of a person not to testify against himself? 5, I don't have to give you anything but my identification, name, and address, so therefore I don't even want to talk to you. You can leave my car and leave me alone. I don't even want to hear you. What do you mean, the pig said. And Huey said, just what I said. The constitutional right of any man is that he doesn't have to testify against himself. And Huey had a big M1 sitting to his right with his hand on it. I had this 9mm sitting beside me, and Huey had this M1 at his side. Huey was driving. 4 other brothers were in the back seat. One of them was Bobby Hutton. They were being quiet because Huey told him to be quiet. And the pig is going crazy. He's by himself, and Huey's got all these black N-words in the car going for the MFer. Meanwhile, while the pig is trying to get bad, 3 cars drove up behind us and 1 in the front. Some more were in the driveway. Blop, blop, blop de blue. Then another car came in front of us. A pig jumped out of the car, walked up to our car, and said through the crack in the window with a hoggish voice trying to sound intimidating, what's going on here? And Huey said, the same basic procedures that are supposed to go on. Huey rolled the window down another 5 or 6 inches. The pigs were looking at the guns in the car. Can I see that pistol there? One of the pigs said. No, you can't see it, Huey told him. I was beginning to get skeptical about what was happening because he pointed to my 9mm pistol. Huey was on probation, and if they thought that this was Huey's pistol, I didn't know this law stuff the way Huey knew it, so I moved the pistol over beside me real close. It had been lying in the middle of the seat. I said, no, you can't see it. Huey said, no, you can't see the pistol, nor this, pointing to his rifle. And you don't want to look, and I don't want you to look at it. You don't have to look at it. Is that your pistol? He asked Huey. And I said, no, it's not his pistol, it's my pistol. I said that because I was thinking the man's going to jump on Huey because he already told me about the probation law. If he gets caught with a pistol, he's burned. But if he gets caught with a rifle, the man can't mess with him because his probation officer told him he can carry a rifle or shotgun and he couldn't stop him. The pig said, can I see it or not? So Huey said to me, I'll talk. And then he said to the pig, no, you can't see the pistol. Get away from the car. We don't want you around the car, and that's all there is to it. Well, I can ask him if I can see his pistol or not, the pig says. So I says, well, you can't see my pistol. The MFers tried to get indignant. They were blabbing and oinking to each other about who in the hell we thought we were, and Constitution my ass, they're just turning it around. Then the pig said to Huey, who the hell do you think you are? Look, damn it, Huey said. He opened the car door. This is where Huey got mad. I mean, you have to imagine this N-word. He got mad because these dogs were going to carry on and they were bracing up like they were bad. Huey didn't go for this at all. Huey got very mad. He opened up the door saying, who the hell do you think you are? In the first place, this man, pointing at the pig, came up here and asked me for my license like he was citing me for a ticket or observation of some kind. This police officer is supposed to be carrying out his duty, and here you come talking about our guns? Huey put his hand around his M1 rifle and continued, we have a constitutional right to carry the guns, and anyway, I don't want to hear it. The pigs backed up a couple of steps, and Huey was coming out of the car. Huey had his hand back in the car getting his M1, and you know, if you've ever seen Huey, he gets growly but articulate. He came out of the car with his M1. Huey knows this law so well that he wouldn't have had the one M1 loaded inside the car. So he came out of the car, he dropped around into the chamber right away. Clack, clop. Who do you think you all are anyway? Huey said to the pigs. And the pigs were all on the sidewalk harassing all the brothers and sisters who gathered around. You move on down the street, said the pig. Huey started interrupting. You don't have to move down the street. Don't go anywhere. These pigs can't keep you from observing. You have a right to observe an officer carrying out his duty. And these pigs, they listen to all this S-word, and it goes on from there. It's a great story. Seize the Time by Bobby Seale. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the third hour of our program. On the line with us is our old friend Victoria Jones, the chief Washington analyst for DC Radio Company, LLC. Her website, her Twitter handle, Victoria Jones DC. And Victoria, welcome back.
Thank you very much, Tom.
It's great having you with us. So I understand that in the UK, the Me Too movement is being stopped in its tracks by male judges. And I don't think there's any parallel to that here in the United States, although educate me if there is. What's going on over there?
Well, I'm not familiar with any parallel here in the U.S., and we're certainly in the U.S., they're hoping, some are anyway, that it's a temporary halt. What has happened is that the Telegraph, which is a broadsheet, one of the, as you know, leading newspapers, got a tip-off in February that a very senior, powerful businessman behaved appallingly towards women. So they started investigating, and they started talking to a lot of former staff and associates to see if the allegations were true. And the sources who had known him for between 10 and 20 years described how they'd been bullied, threatened, and intimidated. So once they'd spoken to more than 24 people, Telegraph said, yeah, apart from the alleged bullying, there were even more serious accusations of sexual harassment and racism against staff. And so they thought, yeah, we're really onto something here. The businessman became aware of this, and then in April, the PR people contacted them, and the Telegraph, just continued. Then they got legal letters arguing that the claims were defamatory and bullying and harassment, and warned that harassment is a criminal offense which can lead to your journalist being fined or imprisoned. So the reporters just continued. Businessman then contacted editors and executives, warning them to desist. Then the Telegraph found it had enough to publish, and that's when they, contacted him again, and that's when it ended up in court. At which point, a judge ruled, a very senior judge ruled, that, in fact, they should be able to go ahead. Justice Haddon Cave said the story was in the public interest, even though there were non-disclosure agreements, and some staff had been paid off, and that the stories were reasonably credible, but there was little or no reasonable expectation of confidentiality, and nor was the information obtained in breach of the NDA's confidentiality said. And it was in the public interest and in the interest of public discourse in a democracy. And so the businessman appealed. Now, by this time, by the way, this justice had been promoted to the appeals court, the second highest court in the land. And this appeals court just decided, with the exception of this justice, that no, in fact, non-disclosure agreement, confidentiality agreements for businesses, despite all these other things which they said were wonderful, press freedom, blah, 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 public interest, non-disclosure agreements were probably more important. And despite the fact that the Telegraph pointed out in its arguments, its lawyers did, that the victims' names would not be published in the story, there would be no breach of confidentiality.
Here's what baffles me about this. I mean, setting aside the libel laws in the UK are strong enough that you can still sue a newspaper. You can not still. I mean, you can sue a newspaper if you don't like what they say, even if you're a public figure. But at least here in the United States, and I thought this was a principle of international law, although I'm not an attorney, I just write books about the law, but I thought that it was not possible, literally not possible, to execute a binding contract that involves a violation of the law. So if this man is having these women that he has harassed sign non-disclosure agreements in exchange for money, that's not against the law. But his initial harassment of them is against the law. So you can't use a contract to get around law breaking, at least in this country. Is that what's going on in the UK? Is that what you're telling me?
That is basically what's going on in the UK. And this is causing some scratching of heads, even of lawyers. And there's some very interesting op-eds being written, one by one senior lawyer saying that it's going to raise concerns about how NDAs are used to cover up potential wrongdoing. And also, there was a hearing before a parliamentary committee, and there were questions in Parliament, and there were lawyers asked about, and they answered, yes, no, we do everything in the client's interest. In fact, it says, the obligation is to behave with integrity in the client's interest.
Okay, could it be, Victoria, that, I mean, you know, when Donald Trump tried to enforce his non-disclosure agreement against Stormy Daniels, and then her lawyer made the argument that, you know, this should be all public because, you know, technically what he did was adultery, which is against the law, and basically, I'm not even sure that this got to the judge ruling, but I remember the debate about it, that in California, I guess, is where it took place, that adultery is actually not against the law there anymore. So therefore, he could have an NDA with Stormy Daniels because it wasn't against the law. Could it be that the types of harassment that are on the verge of being exposed by the Telegraph are not specifically prohibited by British law, that it's just, you know, immoral and embarrassing, legally speaking?
Some of these are against the law. Some of this racist behavior, the bullying behavior, the sexual harassment, this is criminal behavior.
Then how can they hide it with a contract?
That's the point. And Theresa May was asked about that today in Prime Minister's Question Time, and she indeed said that this was appalling and that it needs to be looked into and that things need to be done.
Do you think you've got a couple of judges here on the appeals court who are you know, just as guilty of sexual harassment as the guy who's trying to shut this down, and they're just covering their own butts? No pun intended.
Well, what you do have is judges with a background in contract and employment law. That's what you do have. I can't speak to the other things. And I think, you know, when you have that, you have judges who look at things a certain way. You know, with the first judge, you had a judge with a very strong background in terrorism law, anti-terrorism law, and some very strong rulings on freedom of the press. These other judges have a strong background in contract and employment law. Now, they did say there needs to be a speedy trial, but one lawyer who was quoted in the Telegraph article raised the point that isn't it odd that you can have non-disclosures and so you can have confidentiality if you're rich, but you can't have confidentiality if you're poor.
Yeah, if you're rich or if you're in a position of power over somebody else,
yes,
as an employer,
yes,
for example. Remarkable stuff. Victoria Jones, she is the chief Washington analyst with the D.C. radio company. You can tweet her at Victoria Jones DC. Victoria, keep us up to date on how this story evolves, will you?
Oh, I will.
Thank you very much. It's great having you with us. It's great to hear your voice on our air again. Victoria Jones with the D.C. radio company. Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks.
We'll be back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Are we looking at, well, I would say we are. We are looking at actual terrorism now in the United States. Who inspired this?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Is it inflammatory to say that this kind of terrorist activity, planting bombs, was inspired by the hard right or even by the president? And welcome back. Robert in Kingston, Michigan. Hey, Robert, thanks for watching us on Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hey, Tom. Glad to finally talk to you. First-time caller.
Thank you.
I think that it's time for the Democrats to pick up the game a little bit on the health care and throw in fitness. I live 30 miles from the closest fitness center, and how many days a week am I going to go there? And the young people would probably sign up because they go to fitness centers. So I'd just like to throw that out there and see what you think.
There's some considerable evidence that people who engage in regular exercise are less likely to get sick from a variety of things, you know, from heart disease to cancer, and that their quality of life is better, and that they function better at work and all kinds of good stuff. But you don't necessarily, so somebody needs to do the math on this, and I'm guessing it's already been done by other countries that have single-payer healthcare systems, where they look at, you know, a particular behavior and say, okay, you know, how do we reward or how do we discourage this behavior? You know, raise the tax on cigarettes because, gee, it's costing us a lot to take care of smokers. Decrease the tax on bicycles because people ride bicycles, they're healthier. So I don't know if the financial quantification of the medical benefit of going to a health club regularly equals the cost of a health club. If it does, or even exceeds it, then yeah, a single-payer system should be paying for that. And I know that there are some health insurance programs that do offer discounts in health clubs and things like that. I think that one of the very first was, what's the HMO out in California, Kaiser, the very first HMO. I'm pretty sure that they were doing it for a while years ago. I don't know if they still are. But there's other ways to get exercise. I mean, I had back surgery a couple of years ago, and my back was all screwed up, and I was getting sciatica again. And I've been going through physical therapy and everything else. And I just started, I have an alternate route to walk to work every morning that's a little over a mile instead of a few blocks. And I've been doing that every day and walking home every day that way. And I have been able to quit my physical therapy and quit my exercises and pretty much everything else because that walking 2 miles a day is having such a dramatic positive effect on my health. So, Robert, I would say even if you're not near a health club, you know, get out there and walk a couple miles every day. You know, walk to the store instead of driving, for example.
No, that's not me. No, I walk my dogs 2 miles every day. I'm 64 years old. I'm in good health.
Great.
I'm just saying that just people to get in the car to go 30 miles is some kind of exercise.
Yeah. It's the sort of thing where it would be a cost benefit analysis, but I would think that some sort of perhaps even some sort of subsidy. It's interesting how nations change their behavior. And it's been a long time since I read the reports on this, but there was a really good study. I think it was written by Pew, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, when they moved to a single-payer healthcare system, because now the entire country, everybody in the country is on the hook for the health expenses of everybody else. And so at that point, the country starts looking around, everybody in the country going, you know, if you're going to keep on smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day, eventually I'm going to have to pay for, you know, your lung cancer or your heart disease. And so, you know, I'd like to discourage you to do that. And so, you know, for example, in Japan, you know, an aggressive campaign, media campaign against smoking. Same thing in South Korea. In other places, they try to shame people. In other places, they offer incentives. You know, drug addiction is treated in many of these countries like a disease. You know, rather than imprisoning people, they give them treatment, methadone or whatever it may be, and get them better. So there's lots of ways to do it, Robert. And if and when we get a single-payer system, it's going to be fascinating to watch. You raised a really good question. Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for free. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing. Let's check in with Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News and find out what's going on in the world today. Ellen, this report, by the way, brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen Ratner's new book, Loving What You Do. Hey, Ellen, what's going on in the world? Nice to have you back with us.
I'll tell you, the most interesting thing is that there were packages sent to the Obama's house in Washington, D.C., to the Clintons up in New York, and also to CNN in New York City at their headquarters, and they actually evacuated the entire building. The Secret Service Service has not said what was in the packages. We also know that George Soros got a package 2 days ago. So
and apparently maybe Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Governor Cuomo, although I'm not sure about Governor Cuomo. I think he came out and said it's a terrorist.
We're not sure about that at all, but the White House has actually come out very much against this and says that these people will be prosecuted within the full extent of the law, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I call this scholastic terrorism, Ellen. It's what Bill O'Reilly did when he called George Tiller the baby killer 29 times until finally somebody killed Tiller. It's like, you know, if you yell and scream about how evil the other group is, eventually some maniac is going to go,
go after them. A whack bird is going to go after them for sure.
Yep.
And it's very interesting. I'm actually up in Boston today at a McLean conference, and they are talking about addictions and the various new treatments for addictions. Now, the president claims that addiction has gone down under him, but who knows, right?
Sure.
He claims a lot of things. Okay. Now, one of the things that's very interesting is how healthcare is going to affect the midterms, which are 2 weeks from yesterday. There is a guy by the name of Sessions, not Jeff Sessions from the Justice Department, but Sessions from Dallas. And
Ellen, your phone is just falling apart. We have lost your phone audio. I'm not sure.
Really?
Yeah. Now is that okay? Now I can hear you. Keep going.
Hold on. Let me see if I can get you. I'm having trouble with the internet here.
No, it's all good on the internet. It's just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So you were saying.
So basically, what we know about is that the president is claiming that addiction's gone down under him, but of course he also claimed a lot of things. And in fact, Martha McSally, who is running for Senate in Arizona, claimed that she voted for the pre-existing conditions, which is just absolutely not true.
Yeah, she's one of, I think they're up to 8 or 10 now, Republicans who have come out, including Rick Scott and Scott Walker, come out and said, oh, I want to protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Oh, right.
And they're lying through their friggin' teeth. They have engaged in lawsuits. They have repeatedly voted against pre-existing condition protections. It's just they finally figured out this is a big deal. People like it. It's just like they say, oh, yeah, we love Social Security, when, in fact, they're not. Their main mission is to destroy it.
Now, there's another issue that's going on, and that has to do with this caravan that is coming through Honduras and to Mexico. They broke the wall in Mexico, and the president saying that he is talking to his immigration people and Homeland Security. However, those funds run out on December 7th, so after they come back from recess, they're going to have to decide what to do about that. And Nancy Pelosi said she's not interested in talking to anybody about the wall, even if she tries to deal, even if the president tries to make a deal with the Dreamers.
Interesting.
So that's very interesting. Also, it's very. It looks like the Federal Trade Commission is mandated to police deceptive practices. However, there's a question of online privacy and whether that falls under the FTC's, jurisdiction. And so that it's very interesting about that. Because what's going to happen with online privacy, and we do know that people are very objecting to working for the government because of this, of the privacy issue.
Interesting.
Okay. Also, the president is going after his own federal chair, Federal Reserve Chair. He's saying that every time he increases interest rates, every time we do something good, he's increased interest rates 3 times this year, but it's only 2.25%.
Oh,
I mean, it's not that much money.
No, and not only that, if there's another recession and the interest rates are not up to around at least 3.5% or 4%, the Fed will not be able to lower interest rates far enough and fast enough to stop that recession, which is going to make it a hell of a lot worse. And that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to get back to normal.
Also, there is he has run up the national debt by 17%.
Yeah. If interest rates go to 3.5%, the interest on the federal debt, which is virtually all brought to you by policies promoted by Republican presidents going back to Reagan, who came into office when the federal debt was less than $1 trillion and tripled the national debt in his 8 years. The amount of interest that we'll pay on that national debt is going to be greater than the defense budget.
Well, it's really interesting that there is a building in New York City, which I see all the time, that actually has the national debt and how much we actually owe on it all the time.
Yeah, the guy who started that, he died a few years ago, but apparently Foundation picked it up and they're still running it. Yep.
Now, also, the president says that he's got pictures of Comey and Mueller hugging and kissing. The FBI could not find any of these photos. The president says he's got 100 of these photos. Nobody knows whether they exist or not.
I know they don't. He's lying through his teeth. He lies constantly.
Right. Well, we do know that. Also, as I think I said to you, that healthcare is becoming a major issue. It's becoming a major issue in Florida, where, of course, there's a lot of older people. And there is this issue of Andrew Gillum. He's the mayor of Tallahassee, going against Ron DeSantis. And the issue seems to be healthcare quite a bit.
Very interesting. Yeah, it's a big deal. In fact, after this break, I'm going to play a clip for my listeners from FDR that will remind us all exactly what the Republicans are up to right now. Ellen, thanks so much. It's great to hear from you. Ellen Ratner with Talk Media News, brought to you by goatsfortheoldgoat.com and Ellen's book, Loving What You Do. We'll be back with more of the program right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're going to have a brief visit from Franklin Roosevelt, and then I will be picking up your calls and talking about the news of the day right after this break. It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from An American Prophecy, The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe. And this book was published, I believe, in the late 90s, just FYI. 1998. America feels like it's unraveling. Though we live in an era of relative peace and comfort, we have settled into a mood of pessimism about the long-term future, fearful that our superpower nation is somehow rotting from within. Neither an epic victory nor over communism nor an extended upswing of the business cycle can buoy our public spirit. The Cold War and the New Deal struggles are plainly over, but we are of no mind to bask in their successes. The America of today feels worse in its fundamentals than the one many of us remember from our youth, a society presided over by those of supposedly lesser consciousness. Wherever we look, from L.A. to D.C., from Oklahoma City to Sun City, we see paths to a foreboding future. We yearn for civic character, but satisfy ourselves with symbolic gestures and celebrity circuses. We perceive no greatness in our leaders, a new meanness in ourselves. Small wonder that each new election brings a new jolt, its aftermath, a new disappointment. I'd add this was at the height of the Newt Gingrich and impeachment and all that kind of craziness. Not long ago, America, which is the predecessor, has really set up Donald Trump. Not long ago, America was more than the sum of its parts. Now it is less. Around World War II, we were proud as a people, but modest as individuals. Fewer than 2 people in 10 said yes when asked, "Are you a very important person?" Today, more than 6 in 10 say yes. Where we once thought ourselves collectively strong, we now regard ourselves as individually entitled. Yet even while we exalt our own personal growth, we realize that millions of self-actualized persons don't add up to an actualized society. Popular trust in virtually every American institution, from business and governments to churches and newspapers, keeps falling to new lows. Public debts soar, the middle class shrinks, welfare dependencies deepen, and cultural arguments worsen by the year. We now have the highest incarceration rate and the lowest eligible voter participation rate of any major democracy in the world. Statistics inform us that many adverse trends, crime, divorce, abortion, scholastic aptitudes, may have bottomed out, but we're not reassured. Optimism still attaches to self, but no longer to family or community. This is the consequence of Reaganism. Most Americans express more hope for their own prospects than for their children's or the nation's. Parents widely fear that the American dream, which was there solidly for their parents and still there barely for them, will not be there for their kids. Young householders are reaching their mid-30s, never having known a time when America seemed to be on the right track. Middle-aged people look at their thin savings accounts and slim to none pensions, scoff at an illusory Social Security trust fund, and try not to dwell on what a burden their old age could become. Seniors separate into their own leisure world, recoiling at the lost virtue of youth while trying not to think about the future. We perceive our civic challenge as some vast, insoluble Rubik's Cube. Behind each problem lies another problem that must be solved first, and behind that lies another and another ad infinitum. To fix crime, we have to fix the family, but before we do that, we have to fix welfare, and that means fixing our budget, and that means fixing our civic spirit, but we can't do that without fixing moral standards, and that means fixing our schools and churches, and that means fixing the inner cities, and that's impossible unless we fix crime. There's no fulcrum upon which to rest a policy lever. People of all ages sense that something huge will have to sweep across America before the gloom can be lifted. But that's an awareness we suppress. As a nation, we're in deep denial. While we grope for answers, we wonder if analysis may be crowding out our intuition. The reward of the historian is to locate patterns that recur over time and to discover the natural rhythms of social experience. In fact, at the core of modern history lies this remarkable pattern. Over the past 5 centuries, Anglo-American society has entered a new era, a new turning, every 2 decades or so. At the start of each turning, people change how they feel about themselves, the culture, the nation, and the future. Turnings come in cycles of 4. Each cycle spans the length of a long human life, roughly 80 to 100 years, a unit of time the ancients called seculum. Together, the 4 turnings of the seculum comprise history's seasonal rhythm of growth, maturation, entropy, and destruction. The first turning is a high, an upbeat era of strengthening institutions and weakening individualism, where a new civic order implants and the old values regime decays. The second turning is an awakening, a passionate era of spiritual upheaval when the civic order comes under attack from a new values regime. The third turning is an unraveling, a downcast era of strengthening individualism and weakening institutions when the old civic order decays and the new values regime implants. And the fourth turning is a crisis, a decisive era of secular upheaval when the values regime propels the replacement of the old civic order with a new one. Each turning comes with its own identifiable mood. Always these mood shifts catch people by surprise. In the current seculum, the first turning was the American high of the Truman, Eisenhower, and Kennedy presidencies. As World War II wound down, no one predicted that America would soon become so confident and institutionally muscular, yet so conformist and spiritually complacent. But that's what's happened. The second turning was the consciousness revolution, stretching from the campus revolts of the mid-60s to the tax revolts of the early 80s. Before John Kennedy was assassinated, no one predicted that America was about to enter an era of personal liberation and cross a cultural divide that would separate anything thought or said after from anything thought or said before. But that's what happened. The third turning has been the culture wars, an era that began with Reagan's mid-1980s Morning in America and is due to expire around the middle of the decade, 8 or 10 years from now. Amid the glitz of the early Reagan years, no one predicted that the nation was entering an era of national drift.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Who literally lies to us dozens of times a day, every single day. Thousands of documented lies. And I'm not talking, small stuff like, oh yeah, we had 2.4% unemployment when in fact it was 2.5%. No, it's nothing like that. I'm talking about whoppers, right? Just plain old flat out lies, particularly lies that make Democrats look bad or make Republicans look good. And he lied through the campaign. He lied through the primaries. And by the way, his other Republican opponents tried to call him out on it. You will recall, Mitt Romney saying this man is a pathological liar. Ted Cruz went off on a tear on him, called him a sniveling liar. So here you've got a president who lies constantly. And then on top of that, now you've got the Republican Party actually working to amplify his lies. Like when he lied the other day and said, we're working on a 10% tax cut for working people in America. Nobody in the Republican Party even knew about this. So quickly, in the White House, it's like, quick, we got to get something here so that the president's lie turns into a non-lie. And this one congressman from wherever he is, Republican congressman, says, oh yeah, I'll introduce a resolution. Now, a resolution is just a speech, basically a statement. I'm going to introduce a resolution saying that we should have a 10% tax cut. He's not even offering to introduce a law or a tax cut, just a resolution. And now Trump is saying, see, told you so. I was telling the truth. So let me just share with you two thoughts about this from Franklin Roosevelt, and then I'll pick up your phone calls and we can continue the conversation. These are both from 1936. And this is the first one.
Remember, a number of years ago, there was a book, Mein Kampf, written by Hitler himself. The technique was all set out in Hitler's book, and it was copied by the aggressors of Italy and Japan. According to that technique, you should never use a small falsehood, always a big one, for its very fantastic nature would make it more credible. If only you keep repeating it over and over and over again.
There was a quote I came across yesterday from Joseph Goebbels saying that I'm paraphrasing, but the quote's easy to find, every political slogan needs to be reducible to 3 or 4 words and needs to be repeated over and over and over again until everybody in the country can repeat it from memory. And that's, of course, what's going on right now, right? We're seeing the Nazi technique being used by Donald Trump and his Republican acolytes. And, apropos of that, we've got all these Republicans who are running ads right now and doing media availabilities and even on Fox so-called news saying, oh, no, I love protection for pre-existing conditions. I always loved protections for I will vote for it. I will work for it. When, in fact, there's a lawsuit right now by 20 Republican states attorneys general and signed on by I don't know if it's hundreds or dozens of Republican members of Congress and state legislatures all around the country, go on its way to the Supreme Court to destroy the Affordable Care Act's provision that says that health insurance companies have to pay for pre-existing conditions. Now, they're literally suing to end your pre-existing condition protection, literally suing right now. And most of these members of the House of Representatives have voted to do away with pre-existing condition protections at least 50 times. So here's Franklin Roosevelt on a variation on that. Back in his day, it was Social Security, but it's basically the same thing.
Let me warn you, and let me warn the nation against the smooth evasion that says, of course we believe these things. We believe in Social Security. We believe in work for the unemployed. We believe in saving homes. Cross our hearts and hope to die. We believe in all these things. But we do not like the way the present administration is doing them. Just turn them over to us. We will do all of them. We will do more of them. We will do them better. And most important of all, the doing of them will not cost anybody anything.
There you go. I mean, and that was 1936, right? And it's like, when do we learn from history? Oh, my. Is it Azalee in Villa Park, Illinois? Am I saying your name right?
Yes, Tom, that's right. Thank you so much for taking my call.
Sure.
And thank you for those readings from those books that you do. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
And, I would, I know you talk about Reagan, and I was wondering, I mean, this is not what I called about, but I was wondering, have you written a book on him? Because we need to know about Reagan.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I started out to do that, Azalee, a few years back because, this Reagan mythology has been amplified by a lot of billionaire money. And in my research, what I came across was a book by Will Bunch called Tear Down This Myth, the myth of Ronald Reagan. And it was so brilliantly written, and it was so comprehensive. I thought, if I tried to write a book, I would just be a pale imitation of this book. So if you would like a good book on Reagan, try Tear Down This Myth by Will Bunch, B-U-N-C-H. It's still in print.
Okay.
It's a marvelous book. Every American should read.
Right. Thing is, though, maybe, he's not as well known as you, and I'm not telling you to write one, but if you had written a book like that, I think more people would be familiar with it and would know it.
Yeah.
But
Well, thank you.
It is what it is.
Yep.
But what I called about, like at maybe this time of year in past times, they would have been advertising, about the ACA. People, get there's a deadline for it and all. And I don't see that now, but what I do have on my phone many times a day, people calling in trying to sell me insurance. And so I am wondering, and I mean it's all the time. And so I'm wondering, is this I know it's open enrollment, but they're not trying to do the Medicare, it's insurance. And I'm wondering if this is, the junk stuff that they're coming up with.
Oh, that's a good question.
Because huh?
That's a good question, because the Trump administration has rolled out new rules. I don't think they take effect until next year, though, that say that
they could still sell it to you now. They're not going to wait until then.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
I'm just disgusted with this.
Yeah.
And I usually don't answer them, but I did answer one, and so I asked this person, well, can you get Affordable Care Act coverage through what you sell? She said no.
Yeah, no,
so
of course you can.
What is she selling?
Yeah. Well, she's probably
so
selling the junk insurance. It probably
right.
is.
People should be aware of that. They're going to be paying a lot of money and getting no benefits like before.
Yeah. Well, thanks for waving the flag, Azalee, and thanks for telling us all about it, because I think that I suspect that you are on a list. These guys, they all buy these lists of potential purchasers, and maybe you bought insurance in the last couple of years, and your insurance company sold your phone number, or you had health services from somebody and they sold your phone number, and so they think you might need insurance. But and I wish you well. It's good luck with that. But it probably is that junk insurance. Thank you.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. Boy, this is incredible. A small plane with Nazi markings just crashed on the freeway in Los Angeles. The Nazis are literally falling out of the sky. It's the Red Baron. I don't think so. Glenn, Red, Republican, who knows? Glenn in New York City. Hey, Glenn, what's up?
Yeah, I think we should be screaming bloody murder that Social Security had a $2.9 trillion surplus so far, and $44 billion surplus last year. I think we should be screaming bloody murder that the Republicans want to decrease Social Security benefits.
Oh, they want to take that entire Social Security trust fund, and you're right. It's nearly $3 trillion now, and we have had a surplus ever since '82 every year. It's nearly $3 trillion right now, and they want to hand it off to the banksters in Wall Street who give them huge campaign contributions. It's called privatizing Social Security.
I think it's outrageous, and that everyone should know it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and you just did your part, Glenn, in sharing the word. Thank you for the call. That was a good one. Michael in Princeton, Minnesota. Hey, Michael, thanks for watching Free Speech. What's up?
Hi, Tom. By the way, I read that book, Tear Down This Myth. Tear Down This Myth. It's a very good book.
It is.
But I wanted to back up what you say about the white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Last Thursday, my wife steered me on to a program by Dr. Phil, and he physically showed how to do it. He had a professor come on there with a whole row of students of all different nationalities and backgrounds and all this. And as he asked them 30 or 35 questions, they took a step back or a step forward. I mean, that physically shows you, it's a backup to your very good descriptions of it.
Yeah, these are questions like, when you go out, do you look around to see if there's anybody nearby who might be menacing to you? You know, are you concerned? I forget the questions. Maybe you remember a few of them, Michael, because I know I haven't seen that on Dr. Phil, but I have read. I mean, this is something that goes back to the 60s. It was used. In fact, Louise, my wife, went to school in a little more upscale part of Michigan in East Lansing, you know, college town. Very, very good public schools. And they actually had a Black Studies class that all the kids had to take. And I don't think there were any black kids in the school, but she read Cry the Beloved Country, and she read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and she read White Like Me, or Black Like Me. And I'm pretty sure that's where I heard the first time I heard this, you know, step forward, step back. Do you remember any of the questions, Michael?
Some of it had to do with, you know, how many times you're stopped and credit and housing and...
right. Step forward if you've been stopped by the police. Step back if you haven't. Step forward if you've been discriminated in housing. Or back, you know, the backward or forward could go either way. But basically what you end up with is the white people on one side and the black people or the people of color on the other side.
Well, and it also divided up the Asians, which really was surprising to me that one of the Asians were way in the back.
Yeah.
Because, you know, a lot of people here in the United States, they think that the Asians have kind of privilege here, but they don't any more than the blacks or the Hispanic or anybody else. And the show was really good. I just wish he would have made it a 2-hour show.
Yeah, two good friends of mine are Asian. One is actually a Korean immigrant, and the other has parents who were grandparents who were Chinese immigrants. But he and his parents are full-blooded American. But they both experience some pretty severe discrimination or have in their lives. So yeah, this is just, you know, spot on. Michael, thank you. Hey, thanks so much for your support for the Thom Hartmann Program, along with your support for Free Speech TV. We deliver our program, of course, to commercial stations, which is how we pay our bills through the revenue from running advertising, and you can learn more about those at our website at thomhartmann.com. But we also share our program with non-commercial outlets, from Free Speech TV to Pacifica stations all over the country. And because with the Pacifica radio stations, there's basically no revenue coming in, the way that we support our nonprofit outreach is in large part through Patreon. And, you know, over at Patreon, people who support our program at patreon.com/Thom Hartmann. People who support our program there get, you know, special little clips, and there's a few other goodies, behind the scenes kind of stuff. But that's principally, if you want to support the Thom Hartmann Program, that's the way to do it, is to get over to patreon.com/Thom Hartmann and check out what we're doing and support our program. Thank you.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Hi, Tom. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your show, and I don't know how to thank you, so I'll just say thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Thank you, Maverick.
I have a very quick question, I hope. I don't understand what the term small d Democrat means. Could you explain, please?
Sure. Democracy is a political system of basically rule of the majority, you know, with certain limits, and back at the time of the founding of this country, the word republic and the word democratic or democracy, excuse me, democracy and republic were basically interchangeable. You look at the dictionaries from the 1700s and they're identical. But so the first political party that was created was the Federalists. This was the party that was arguably created by and with George Washington, although he later disavowed them, and it became John Adams' political vehicle. It was a right-wing political party. Thomas Jefferson was the anti-Federalist. He started the Anti-Federalists, and they created a party called the Democratic Republicans, and literally Thomas Jefferson founded that party. In the 1820s, they dropped the word Republican from their name, and that has been the Democratic Party ever since the founding of the Republic, essentially. It's the oldest political party in America. So people who describe themselves as Democrats, or for that matter, back in the founding era, they more frequently referred to themselves as Republicans. Jefferson referred to himself as a Republican and talked about Republican principles. It was always with a small r. They meant using this concept of government. I believe in this form of government. But now you say, are you a Democrat? Well, yeah, I'm a big D Democrat. That means I'm a member of this political party. I'm a small D Democrat. I believe in the concept of democracy, which is, by the way, in peril right now. Does that all make sense, Maverick?
Well, couldn't you be both?
Sure, I am both.
Oh, okay, all right, because I was trying to parse that out.
No, they're not mutually exclusive. It's basically you're talking either about political theory or about partisan politics. So
it's kind of like a rectangle's a square, but a square isn't a rectangle type of deal.
Yeah, that would be sort of. And the same thing with Republicans. You could be a small R Republican, believe in republics as a form of governance, or you can be a big R Republican, believing in being a member of the Republican Party. Maverick, I got to move along, but thanks for the question. I love those kind of questions. Horace in High Point, North Carolina. Hey, Horace, what's up?
How you doing? I just wanted to speak about this bombing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's despicable. And in my personal opinion, I think all of that rhetoric comes from the top, which is Donald Trump.
Yes,
now,
this is what Governor Cuomo just said in New York State. And by the way, if I can interrupt you just for a second, Horace, with a news flash here. Sean, you said they just found another one where? At Maxine Waters' office. They just intercepted a suspicious package at Maxine Waters' office, number one. And number two, we got a call earlier from somebody suggesting that Debbie Wasserman Schultz got a package because, Bernie people don't like her. Turns out that all of these bombs have Debbie Wasserman Schultz's home address or office address as the return address. None were actually sent to her, but one was supposed to be sent to Eric Holder or somebody. And because they had the wrong address for this person, it got sent back to Debbie Wasserman Schultz, which is how she ended up with one, but she was not the target of this. Anyhow, Horace, forgive my interruption. Back to you.
All right. The thing that should be done now, right now, not tomorrow, not next week, they should have a way to get Donald Trump and all of his little colleagues the heck out of office because he's tearing the country down. He shouldn't go to jail. They should put him underneath the jail. All of them crooks, Mitch McConnell, all of them, Devin Nunes, what in the world are they waiting on? I can go to court myself and get enough conviction for all of them.
Yeah.
Have a blessed day.
Thank you, Horace. I get your passion, and I am... I try to stay away from salvationist thinking. Something will save us eventually. But I am looking forward to Robert Mueller's report. And if it has the kind of bombshells in it that I suspect it will, we may be accomplishing exactly, not under the jail kind of stuff, your hyperbole, Horace, but, the goal that you're trying to get to may well be happening. Robert in Tyler, Texas. Hey, Robert, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for your program. I think that you ought to suggest that our listeners, your listeners, watch some of Fox every day so that they can talk back to these people about what their lies they're spreading.
I agree. I shared the story on the program about how 3 days ago, Saturday, Louise and I went to our granddaughter's birthday party, and it's about a 40-minute drive from here, or 30-minute drive from here, and all the way there and all the way back, we listened to Fox News on Sirius XM on our car radio, and and because I hadn't watched it, I don't have it at home on my TV, and I hadn't watched it or listened to it in a long, long time, and it was just shocking to me how the lies and the hatred. I mean, just shocking. I agree with you, Robert. I think particularly the evening prime time shows are really worth checking out.
Yeah, and Fox, whatever time of day they can, just take some time and listen to their lies that they're spreading.
Yeah, there you go.
Invigorate them.
Yep, and mute the ads. Robert, thank you for the call. Mark in San Francisco, listening on AM 910. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Oh, Tom, yeah, I was thinking about the next election for the Democrats for the presidential run. I think they ought to run on green energy jobs for everybody, full employment, and put an end to the fossil fuel grip on our politics and put people to work.
I agree. And I think if healthcare wasn't such a huge priority, they probably would be. But that day is going to come, too, especially as climate change gets worse and worse. Carol in Bridgeton, New Jersey. Carol, you have the last minute.
Oh, yes. I was just calling
I wanted to know how are these rallies that the president attends with Air Force One being financed?
We are picking up the tab for everything except the expenses specific to the rallies. We're paying to fly him there. We're paying to fly him home. We're paying for his overnight accommodations if he stays somewhere. We're paying for the Secret Service detail. We're paying for everybody who flies along with him, I believe. I mean, it's possible. So, yeah.
Totally unprecedented. And
no, it's not actually unprecedented, Carol. It's every president since this goes back to somewhere in my lifetime they started doing this, and there was a big hoop-de-doop about it, and I'm not sure if it was George Herbert Walker Bush or Ronald Reagan, but one of them started doing campaign things using Air Force One, and it's just been going on ever since.
So he goes out and he incites people to,
to violence.
Maybe these acts that are happening all over the country today.
In fact, he says he'll pay the legal fees for violence.
And then he comes out on television and says he's very upset. He's very angry. We don't condone this.
Right.
But it's just
and you and I get the bill for it, and he's selling maggot stuff, in his campaign things, and all these maggot people are buying all these maggot hats and stuff, and it's incredible. And he's literally making money off these rallies. Carol, thanks for the call. Thanks so much for being with us today. What a day! Wow. We are seeing the fruit of stochastic terrorism being laid out by principally one political party. It's just breathtaking. Anyhow, the thing that we have to do is do not despair. Get active. Get out there, get active. Tag You're It. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.